On SC-900, which is the Microsoft certification for security, compliance, and identity fundamentals. We'll be touching base on Microsoft 365 and Microsoft Azure solutions, in particular security and identity. This session today is more conceptual rather than practical hands-on. However, during the session, we will dive into the individual services for a brief 5 to 10 minutes, just to show you how to go about either creating a particular user or a Microsoft 365 security group, and applying the level of security you need to make sure your environment is secure. The course today has 4 modules. Module 1 being describe concepts of security, compliance, and identity. Module 2 being describe the capabilities of Microsoft Entra, which was formerly known as Azure Active Directory. Module 3 being describe the capabilities of Microsoft security solutions. So we'll be looking at Defender XDR, Microsoft Sentinel, Defender for Cloud, and a few other solutions. And then Module 4, describing the capabilities of Microsoft compliance solutions. Of course, security should be top of mind for any organization. Over the past 3 to 5 years, there have been several different adversaries in the threat landscape. Therefore, we need to make sure our security posture is as secure as it should be, and we're reducing our overall exposure across our landscape. Give an introduction to myself and Steve on today's webinar. My name's Rio. I head up technology at West Coast Cloud. I've been here just over 5 years with an SME area of security and identity. I'm certified across Microsoft 365, Microsoft Azure, and also a cyber architect. With that being a Microsoft MVP in cloud security across the modern work solutions. Part and parcel of being a Microsoft MVP, I create a whole load of content and post it on YouTube, albeit identity orientated, whether or not that be conditional access, identity protection, global secure access, so on and so forth. I post a whole load of content there to be consumed. We're also a packed publishing technical reviewer for those Microsoft certified books. And I'll pass you over to Steve so he can introduce himself.
Hi, everybody. I'm Steve Miles. By now, you've probably read all that information anyway. But yeah, just to give you the summary. So my subject matter expertise is around Azure and security. So more in the Azure space, where Rio works in identity space. So we sort of cross in the middle with security. So likewise with Rio, also certified across the stack, Microsoft certified trainer, MVP as well for Azure. Part of the cloud agnostic approach we have is I'm also at Alibaba Cloud MVP. Likewise with Rio, we both do work with Pact as freelance. So I'm an author. Shameless plug there, link for some of the books that I've written. And for Rio that didn't mention him, Rio's got a YouTube channel as well, so if you give that a like and subscribe, lots of great stuff there on that, lots of hands-on implementation. So yeah, what I'll just say is just on this, because the team's live, there's probably a couple of 2, 3, 4 seconds lag between when we move slides. So if we start talking and the slide hasn't appeared yet, bear with it, the slide will be there. It just takes a spell. or if we pause for 2, 3 seconds, we're like clicking next, pause in 2, 3 seconds, then we're speaking purely because of a team's lag. So yeah.
Thanks, Steve. Moving on to making the most out of today's session. Of course, today's slides should cover everything you need to know to pass the exam. We'll get into the criteria of the exam in a second. However, if there are areas which you want to dive a bit deeper into post this course today, then there is the Microsoft Learn documentation on the public internet via learn.microsoft.com. And you can also access your account where you can associate your certifications to via aka.ms/my Microsoft Learn profile. So if you are going to go and take the exam after today's course, you will need to create yourself a Learn account. That Learn account will then give you the ability to purchase the exam and then take the exam. And with that, you can take that as a you can associate that with your Learn profile. These are just some useful links for you to take offline after today's course. So learn.microsoft.com/certifications is where you can see all your certifications tied to your Microsoft Learn profile. We've also got a link here, aka.ms/renew your cert, albeit the fundamentals exams don't need renewing. They are permanent, they're static. So once you've taken the exam, they stick with you for the time the exam is live or active, but until it gets depreciated. For any associate or expert-led exams, they do require a level of renewal every 365 days every year, and that's free. Getting ready for your Microsoft certified exams. So we'll be looking at 4 modules, like I said, describing the concepts of security, compliance, and identity, describing the capabilities of Microsoft Entra, describing the capabilities of Microsoft Security, and describing the capabilities of Microsoft Compliance Solutions. These are broken down into key areas, of which there's a percentage aligned to each 4 areas. The first area being the concepts, which takes up 10 to 15% of the overall exam. Capabilities of Microsoft Entra taking up 25 to 30, and that's the same for both security as well as compliance as well. So if you're looking at, or asking the question, where should I focus my efforts in regards to learning the content, then the second, third, and fourth module should be where you're paying most attention to. There's a whole load of videos and collateral, like I said, on my YouTube channel on the Learn documentation, aka.ms/SC Fun Path, where you can look at all the course modules post the course. And you can also take practice assessments within a particular sandbox environment, so you can test out the stuff we're going to be going through today. Here are some of the URLs. So one being aka.ms/SC Fun Path. And of course, we will share the slides after today's session. There's also a URL here for the labs. So any practical labs, anything hands-on, there'll be a list of labs we can share with you, which takes you through kind of steps 1 to 10 in regards to not necessarily implementing the solutions, but just taking you through a wizard and showing you how to access the particular solutions. Other than our own internal content, we've also got public authors, other people outside of West Coast Cloud. We advocate content for John Saville being one. Right, he's posted an exam cram on his YouTube channel, and with that, it's very useful to watch just before you take the exam. On the other side, we've got the books. So Steve, like I said, he's a published author. We'll try and send out the ebooks after today's course to everyone who had attended, albeit that be the AZ-900, AI 900. We've got some Windows Server Administration books there as well, and a few other around data fundamentals. That'll be useful for any other certifications you may want to take moving forward. So taking the exam, right, you need to log into your Learn profile. You access aka.ms/my certifications, and with that you find the relevant exam code. For this particular exam, it will be the SC-900, and you just want to scroll down and select your geographic region. You'll get the price, and of course we'll provide the exam vouchers off the back of today's session. And then, of course, you select schedule exam, and with that, that'll take you through to the Pearson View website, which you can select an appropriate time to take the exam. That is proctored. The exam is proctored, so you can either do that in your own personal space, at home, in the office, or you can attend a exam centre where you can take that under a proctored environment. In regards to the course info and what's needed to pass, the exam is out of 1,000 points. You need 700 to pass the exam, which equates to 70% of the exam. It is multiple choice. You don't lose points for selecting the options when you don't know the answer. So it's always worth giving it a go. and you'll always receive the results straight after the exam. There will be no case studies in today's exam. The case studies that normally consist in or persist in the associate and expert-led certifications. It is pretty much just a tick box exercise, a multiple choice examination. In regards to timings today, the modules normally take up to around an hour for each module. So there are 4 modules, which we've already been through. We'll try and get through as quick as possible because, of course, the webinar is set up for 9 a.m. till 1 p.m. There will be breaks after each module for about 5-10 minutes. We're going to try and get through till lunchtime up to 1 o'clock. So to kick things off, the first learning path for today is describe the concepts of security, compliance, and identity. This covers describing security and compliance concepts, describing identity concepts, and we'll do a quick knowledge check at the end of each learning path. For the knowledge check, if you could just paste your answers in the Q&A box, and then we'll review and we'll look at it accordingly. So describing security and compliance concepts. We'll touch base on zero trust methodology, the defense in-depth security models, some important information around the basic governance, risk and compliance concepts, shared responsibility. Of course, security is not just you're not just liable for security, also the service provider, in this case Microsoft, and describing the concepts around encryption and hashing and the differences between the two. So security should be top of mind for any business. The security landscape is changing as we know it. People, identities, devices no longer just sit within the known corporate boundary. We've got people either working from home now, hybrid working, on the road visiting clients. Therefore, we have to scale security. And this is where really the zero trust methodology comes into play. The logic behind the zero trust methodology is assume everything is open in an untrusted network, right? And this follows the approach of trust no one and verify everything. And really, Microsoft are trying to advocate the 3 guiding zero trust principles. 1 being verify each and every endpoint, whether or not that's an identity or an overriding identity, which could be a device, could be an application, could be anything in your directory. Provide least amount of access through privileged access, right? So just in time, just enough access for your colleagues, for your internal peers, and assume breach. So we want to segment so we can reduce lateral movement. And these 3 guiding principles support these 6 foundational pillars, starting from identities, which could be users, services, and devices. So we want to enact strong authentication against these identities, whether or not that be multi-factor authentication through the likes of Microsoft Authenticator app, FIDO2 Alliance keys, Windows Hello for Business, that type of stuff. Devices and applications tend to overlap. So from this perspective, we're looking at shadow IT, right? Devices are no longer just corporate devices. We also have BYOD devices, personally registered devices, people using their own kit to access your corporate line of business resources. So we need to gain visibility, and the way we gain visibility is through the Microsoft solutions such as Defender for Cloud apps. Applications. AI is a big thing at the moment, especially around Microsoft 365 Copilot, Microsoft 365 Copilot versus ChatGPT, why we should be using one over the other. We tend to talk about security and how your data remains within your given Microsoft 365 service boundary. But applications in general, we're looking at hardening, making sure they're more secure, visibility around our applications, who's using what application. I mean, how many of us in today's session know who's using ChatGPT in our organization? That's something we should be aware of because, of course, there are data concerns and security concerns around that. Data fundamentally should be priority for anything we talk around security. We want to make sure data is not necessarily just classified, but also discovered. We need to understand where that data lives, whether or not that's Microsoft 365, on-prem, third party, on a physical device. We need to be able to discover that information, classify it, and then enact the appropriate security controls around that, whether or not that's encrypt, label, apply watermark or footer. This is stuff that should really be at the forefront of our minds. Infrastructure, we need to implement real-time threat detection, alerts, right? We really want to do this at the perimeter layer so we can reduce point of entry or point of execution, which then in return reduces lateral movement across our estate. And that carries over to the network where we really want to segment, isolate, create silos so that threat vectors can't laterally move across your organization. So that's the zero trust methodology. This then follows on to defense in depth, and defense in depth is a layered approach to security, right? The whole persona around this is we're going to have a series of mechanisms, and this is going to slow the enhancement of attack. And this first starts off at physical security, to identity and access, to perimeter, network, compute, application, and fundamentally the data we're trying to secure. And if we look at these layers in a bit more detail, it starts off with this physical security, which is around a physical boundary around your given network, whether or not that's a Microsoft data center where we need to fob in and fob out, right? Whether or not that's a given office building where you've got a load of equipment and kit, you still need to either have a key card, an NFC card to get in, or you need to provide a PIN or provide some sort of verification. There is a physical security around your resources. Identity and access is all around the thought process of who should have access, what level of access do they need, and for what for. Perimeter, we start looking at alerts because, like I said, the problem is with most compromises and with most identities being compromised, it tends to be an identity gets compromised, then that identity is then used to compromise other identities. So setting up the alerting in the first place is great, and will give the global administrators and the other admins in your organization an indicative of whether or not to act and remediate upon identifying a potential compromise. Networking, we want to isolate and we want to encrypt both internal and external communications, both at rest and in transit. Compute, anyone remember Patch Tuesday, right, where Microsoft will release a feature and qualitative update each and every week. We want to make sure our systems are up to date and secure and there's no known exploits and no known vulnerabilities on our given equipment. Applications, we want to make sure that applications are secure by default. When the developers are going ahead and creating the application, they want to make sure the code is up to date and that there is no and they've hardened the code as much as possible. And then fundamentally data is what we're trying to secure. It could be sensitive information around our data, i.e. ethnicity, information around the individual, or alternatively, personal identifiable information. We want to make sure that's secure. So governance. So a structured approach for managing GRC helps organizations reduce risk and improve compliance effectiveness, right? An important prerequisite to establishing GRC is understanding the key terms, and it starts off with governance. Governance is pretty much a system of rules, practices, and processes an organization uses to direct and control its activities, right? Many organizations' activities arise from external standards, obligations, and expectations. For example, organizations tend to establish rules and processes that define who, what, where, and when users and applications can access corporate resources, who has administrative privileges, and for how long. That's governance. We'll then start looking at risk management, which is the process of identifying, assessing, and responding to threats or events that can impact company or customer objectives. And organizations face risk from both, not just external, but also internal sources. External risk can come from political and economic forces, weather-related events, pandemics, and security breaches, to name just a few. And internal risk could come from within the organization itself. An example could be including leaks of sensitive data or data leakage, intellectual property theft, IP theft, fraud, and insider trading. And then compliance refers to either a country, region, state, or law, or even multinational regulations that an organization must follow. These regulations define what types of data must be protected, what processes are required under legislation, and what penalties are issued to organizations that fail to comply. It's important to note, though, that compliance is not the same as security. However, security should be considered when building a compliance plan, as effective security is frequently a compliance requirement. Compliance requires only that the legally mandated minimum standards are met, whereas data security covers all the processes, procedures, and technologies that define how you look at sensitive data and how you secure against those particular breaches. Confidentiality, integrity, and availability, CIA. And we're not talking Men in Black CIA here. This is confidentiality, integrity, and availability. This is used to think about potential trade-offs when we talk about security. And it first starts off with confidentiality, and confidentiality tends to be the most visible part of security when we talk CIA. And this is all around ensuring sensitive data such as certificates, passwords, numerical keys remain confidential and secret. And how I want you to look at this is, many organizations will need to compromise on a potential trade-off in security, and they tend to pick 2 out of 3 within the CIA model. And it may be that confidentiality is your priority from that perspective, and you want to make sure your sensitive data is secure, your customer information is secure, and it doesn't leave your sovereignty. Therefore, we've got the remaining 2 to pick out of, either availability or integrity. And it may be that an organization wants their stuff to be confidential, but also readily available through the availability piece, but that may compromise on the integrity and the accuracy of that data. Or vice versa. It may be that your organization may want your data to be confidential, but also accurate and up to date. But that may compromise on the data being readily available. So there's no right or wrong answer here. It's just to make you think around the potential trade-offs when we talk security. This then leads us on to the shared responsibility model. And if you've ever seen the service models, it starts off with, of course, on-prem, IaaS, PaaS, and SaaS. On-prem, also known as private cloud, right, is where we manage not only the physical hardware, the operating system, the application, but also the data and the identities and the physical endpoints. This tends to be at the start a CapEx cost, right, where we purchase the kit. We may need to maintain that kit for several years, and the cost for that kit tends to depreciate over time, right? Of course, there are pros to hosting your workloads on-prem. Some of the pros being, of course, the physical security boundary. You manage that. You understand where your data is being held and being stored. And of course, you've got the ability to upgrade and scale when required. Infrastructure as a service seems to be our point of entry point when it comes to cloud, right? And this tends to be we're looking at migrating workloads to the cloud, and it tends to be the physical data center, the network, and the host initially, and customers tend to use this for DR and backup. Platform as a service is all around, okay, we've already done a lift and shift of our physical infrastructure. We're also going to alleviate the burden and move away our operating systems and some of our network and security controls to the service provider, in this case, Microsoft. And this tends to be used for business analytics and business intelligence requirements. And then the SaaS offering is what we know and love, right, and what we use every day. This could be Microsoft 365 productivity suite, such as Word, PowerPoint, Excel Online. This could be Power BI. This could be Viva Engage. This could be Microsoft Teams. Any of these particular solutions are SaaS offerings hosted by a service provider, and in this case, it's Microsoft. And I think what you need to take away from this shared responsibility model is the further you move from right to left, you're taking away the accountability from yourself, and you're alleviating the requirements on yourself. I mean, on-prem can be quite tedious at some points, especially if you've got kit. The kit needs to be maintained, right? And in return, there's a high overhead and high cost around maintaining that kit. Also, the skill sets needed to configure the kit, whether or not that's upgrading or installing brand new kit, you still need the skills there to implement that. With the cloud offerings such as Microsoft Azure, it's very seamless, very efficient. You can provision compute resources, storage resources, all that lovely stuff in Microsoft Azure, straight from a click of a button. And all you really need is a HTML5 browser to access Microsoft Azure, and then you're good to go. So encryption at its simplest term, right, is the ability to convert plain text into ciphertext. That's encryption at, the highest level or the highest degree. However, when we talk encryption in, from a Microsoft perspective, there are two types of encryption they use. One being symmetric encryption and two being asymmetric encryption. Symmetric encryption is where we use the same key to not only encrypt, but also decrypt, right? Asymmetric is where we can use the public key to encrypt. We can use both keys to encrypt, but we can only use the private key to decrypt our information. And it tends or seems to be the standard today, especially when we're looking at regulatory frameworks such as FedRAMP, NIST, Cyber Essentials. They tend to want everyone to be using asymmetric encryption at this point. And there are different types of making sure our data is secure and encrypted, right? We've got data at rest wherein wherever our data is located or sits, it needs to be encrypted. So think of this as a database, for example, or a file share. We want to make sure unauthorized people can't access our data, and that data or that plain text is transformed into ciphertext and scrambled so those unauthorized people can't access it, but the authorized people can. That tends to be data at rest. Data in transit is where maybe we're pulling information from the public domain, or we're moving some data from source to destination. We want to make sure that data is encrypted. Hashing is similar to encryption, but in essence, it's not encryption. It's just using an algorithm to convert the original text to a unique fixed length hash value. So each time the same text is hashed using the same algorithm and the same hash value is produced. That hash can then be used as a unique identifier of its associated data. So hashing is different to encryption in that it doesn't use keys, so public-private keys, and the hash value isn't subsequently decrypted back to the original value. Hashing tends to be used to store passwords. You may have seen this in Entra Connect at some point, or formerly known as Azure Active Directory Connect, where they use MD3, MD4 hash. When a user enters their password, the same algorithm that created the stored hash creates a hash of the entered password. This is compared to the stored hash version of typically the password, and if they match, the user has entered their password correctly. This is more secure than storing plain text passwords. And this is not to say, threat vectors haven't caught up with the idea of hashing. That's why Microsoft have introduced salted passwords, which where we've got that fixed value, they just add an extra few numerical characters at the beginning to make it slightly more secure than it already was. So this is the end of module 1, and I want to say that's the boring stuff. But we're going to have, so this was all concepts, right? General concepts around security, not necessarily Microsoft, but I did try to associate with, what Microsoft do. And then the next couple modules will be more Microsoft orientated. But just a few knowledge check questions at the end of this learning path. They seem to have been removed. Yep. So we'll do this at the end of the module. So describe identity concepts. So understand the difference between authentication and authorization. So we'll look at that. Describe the concept of identity as a security perimeter, and describe identity related services. So just to kick off with authentication and authorization. Authorization is simply the process of proving that the person is who they say they are. And authorization determines the level of access or permissions they have to complete a particular action. From an analogy perspective, how I want you to look at this is when you go to an airport, right, you bring two important pieces of information one being the passport and two being the boarding pass. The passport will prove who you say you are. It's got your first name, it's got, where you were born, date of birth, that type of stuff, right? And you use that to authenticate yourself. A boarding pass is this authorization piece where it tells you exactly what terminal you need to be at, what gate you need to be at, not only what gate you need to be at, the location, but also what time, and then where you're sitting on the plane. That's how I want you to look at authentication and authorization. We looked at the defense in depth chart earlier in today's session, and the physical security layer was number one. The second layer of the defense in depth layer was identity. And identity tends to be the new security perimeter as it stands due to the change of landscape, right? We talked about people working from home earlier, people on the road. Some people call them road warriors. But the physical security no longer is in play, and the identity is now at the forefront of everything we do, security. And I want you to think of identity as an umbrella term, right? Identity is not just a user account, can be an application, can be a device, it can be anything which has an association of an individual or something trying to prove who they say they are. And this tends to cover four pillars of identity infrastructure, right? One being authentication authorization, which we've just been through, right? The process of maybe entering your Entra ID credentials and password and going through a level of strong authentication. Administration, how are those users being created? Why were they created? What level of access do those users have? The identity lifecycle from that point of view. And then auditing. Everything we do should be audited, whether or not that's, creating resources, deleting resources, modifying resources, changing a particular user license. It should all be timestamped at some point. And with what we like to call Microsoft Entra ID, there is a level of auditing, whether or not you've got free tier licensing or premium tier licenses through Entra ID Plan 1 or Plan 2. Free tier tends to give you 7 days worth of audit login, and the premium tier tends to give you 30 days worth of audit login. So before we crack on and actually look at a Microsoft Entra ID as a solution, I first just want you to understand where the role of the IDP provider came into play and how we now look at authentication and authorization as what we like to call modern authentication. So typically, or we may need to step back slightly in time here, we would have a client and we would have a server. That client would, of course, have a user using the client, and the user would want to access a particular resource, right? And the resource or the application or LOB app would be hosted on a server. And that user would tend to enter a username and password. And of course, that client would then speak to the server and provide access. That was great if we only had one app on one server. But what was the case back in the day was we would have multiple servers and multiple applications, and that user would have to provide a set of username and password for each server they would need to access the given application. And of course, that was a massive problem for the end user using the client, because of course they would have to remember a whole load of different username and passwords. That the sessions would time out, all that lovely stuff. So what happened was the light bulb moment happened where they're like, okay, why don't we put what we like to call an identity provider as kind of an intermediary broker in between the client and the server. And this is going to handle the authentication authorization process for all these different servers. So what happens now is the client speaks to the IDP provider in the middle between the client and the server, and the IDP provider will provide back a access token or a security token, right? And then that security token then can be passed on to the given servers they need to access with the one given credentials. And the way that works is the IDP provider has a federation trust between itself and the server. Okay, and you're probably asking, what is an access token? Well, an access token is just kind of a cryptographically signed piece of information about you as an identity, right? And it has something called claims, and claims is just the information around the given user trying to authenticate and authorize. And This not only helps with that process of, being able to provide an access token to all these given servers, it's also enacts the principle of single sign-on so that they can use the one set of credentials to access a multitude of different applications and services. And this is where fundamentally Entra ID came into play, which was formerly Azure Active Directory, right? And the problem with Active Directory domain services on-prem was that modern authentication wasn't supported. So this was the new way of being able to manage our identities and make it more streamlined and efficient. And especially in today's, evolving world where we've got more devices than ever, especially bring your own device scenarios and people working outside the corporate boundary where, you would usually need some sort of level of access. This is going to help drastically. Concept of federation. So what we've got here is quite kind of a simple setup, right? User is authenticating with IDP-B, and the website is authenticating with IDP-A. And the user wants to access the website, but of course they're authenticating on different IDP providers. But as you see at the top between domain A and domain B, there's a federation or a trust relationship between IDP-A and IDP-B. So what that tends to mean is the user can provide their credentials to IDP-B, and those credentials be passed on to the website for them, of course, the user then to be able to access the given website. And that's kind of how federation trust works within a given setup. And we've probably all used federation at some point in the past, whether or not you access a website and, signing with LinkedIn, for example, right? That'll be a case of federation where LinkedIn is the identity provider and you're using LinkedIn to maybe create yourself an account on the given website or access whatever you need to on that particular resource. So this is how the concept of federation works. So concept of directory services, right? In the context of computer network, directory tends to be a hierarchical structure that stores information about objects on the network. It stores directory data, makes available to any network users, admins, services, and applications. AD, or Active Directory, is a set of directory services developed by Microsoft as part of Windows Server 2000 for on-prem domain-based networks. The best known service of this kind of AD domain services. It stores information about members of the domain, including devices and users, verifies that their credentials, and defines their access rights. A server running Active Domain services is a domain controller. And Active Directory domain services tends to be a central component for many organizations with on-prem IT infrastructure, which we looked at the shared responsibility model earlier. And it gives organizations the ability to manage multiple on-prem infrastructure components and systems using a single identity per user. And Active Directory domain service doesn't, however, natively support mobile devices, SaaS applications, or online business apps that require model authentication methods. And seems to be the case, the growth of cloud and Microsoft and SaaS application and personal device being used at work has resulted in the need for more modern authentication and an evolution of Active Directory-based identity solutions. So this is where kind of Microsoft Entra ID came into play, previously referred to as Azure ID, which is the next evolution of identity and access management. It provides organizations with an identity as a service solution for all their apps across cloud and on premises. And then, of course, in the next upcoming slides, we'll focus on a bit more around Entra ID as a solution within the Entra family of products. And how it is that cloud-based identity provider. So in this learning path, we touch base on the guiding principles and the 6 foundational elements of zero trust, concept of governance, risk, and compliance, how the CIA represents the goals of cybersecurity. So we talked about those trade-offs, shared responsibility model from kind of on-prem to IaaS, PaaS, and SaaS, differences between encryption and hashing. And of course, we looked at a simple concepts such as authentication authorization, analogy around the airport, right? Bringing your 2 pieces of identity. Identity being the new security perimeter as the security landscape has now changed, and the role of the identity provider and how that all came around in regards to modern authentication. So we've got a quick knowledge check now, and we'll go through this together. And the answers, if you could just paste on the Q&A chat. So first one being, The human resources organization want to ensure that stored employee data is encrypted. Which security mechanism would they use? I'm going to have a quick look at the chat. I got Vincent in the chat saying B. Give it a few more seconds. And sorry, guys, I'm working with one screen here. Yep. So we've got one person so far. So the answer to the question is encryption at rest, right? I think the key word in this question is they want to ensure that stored employee data is encrypted rather than anything else. Encryption at rest would be if the data is moving from one destination to another, and hashing is the process of converting that original text into a fixed value through the salted passwords. So B would be the answer to this question. Second question, which of the following best describes the concepts of data sovereignty? I'll let you guys read A, B, and C. Oh, got a few answers here. Some saying B, some saying C. So the answer for this one is I actually need to read it myself. Data. Yeah, B. So data, particularly personal data, is subject to the laws and regulations of the country, region in which it's physically collected, held, or processed. So that is the answer. So why data sovereignty is the concept that data, particularly personal data, is subject to laws and regulations of the country and region in which it's physically collected, held, or processed. So one more set of questions before we have a 5-10 minute break. Which relationship type allows federated services to access resources? A being claim relationship, B being shared access relationship, and C being trust relationship. Cool. The answer for this one is C, being trust relationship, which is being able to enact federated services. And I think the killer point there is claim relationship isn't such a thing, if that makes sense. And nor is B. And this is the typical like Microsoft questions, right? They'll ask a set of questions, give you a set of answers, and some will just be kind of red herrings that they don't even make sense, if that makes sense. um, Authentication is the process of doing what? And we should all get this. This is very straightforward. Yeah, then this one will be A, which is verifying that user or device is who they say they are. So I'm struggling with one screen here, guys. I can't really see what you're submitting. But yeah, it's A. So what we'll do here, we've finished the module. We'll take a 5-minute break. What's the time now? 9:46. So yeah, sorry. Yeah, if we come back at 9:55 latest, and then we'll crack on with the second module of today. Thank you.
Yeah, that.
Real. I hope everyone's had a nice break. Get yourself a nice cup of tea, nice cup of coffee. We're going to kick off with the second module. Like I said, the modules we want to say last around about an hour, if that. But we want to try and crack through as quick as possible because we got up till 1 p.m. today. Just quickly fighting with one monitor, guys. Please bear with me. Yep. So learning path 2, describe capabilities of Microsoft Entra ID. So formerly Azure Active Directory. Please forgive me if I say Azure AD at some point during the session, but just think of Entra ID if I were to say Azure AD. Learning path 2, we're going to describe the function and the identity types of Microsoft Entra ID. Describe the authentication capabilities of Microsoft Entra ID. Describe the access management capabilities of Microsoft Entra ID. So we're looking at role-based access control through privileged roles, and describe identity protection and governance capabilities of Microsoft Entra. So module 1, intro, describe the core functionality of Microsoft Entra ID, types of identity supported, and the concept of a hybrid identity. So Microsoft Entra ID, formerly Azure Active Directory, is a Microsoft cloud-based identity and access management service. Organizations use Microsoft Entra ID to enable their employees, B2B, so business-to-business collaboration, or guests, and others to sign in and access their corporate resources. Internal resources such as cloud apps developed by your own organization can be accessed through Microsoft Entra ID. External services such as Microsoft Office 365, the Microsoft Azure Management Portal, and any other SaaS applications provided by Microsoft and other third parties. Not only that, though, we can synchronize our identities from on-prem Active Directory domain services up to Microsoft Entra ID through the use of Entra Connect Sync, formerly known as Azure Active Directory Connect, and securely enable the use of devices owned either by your organization or personal devices, such as BYOD, and that could be either mobile, tablets, thin clients, laptops, that lovely stuff. And also enable collaboration with business partners and customers. So you can invite people from external into your internal organization to access your corporate resources, your files, your documents. Think of that as like maybe you've got a marketing practice external, right? And you're inviting them into your organization. They need to white label your content internally. You can use it, what we like to call B2B, and invite them from external to internal. Subscribers to Azure services, Microsoft 365 or Dynamics automatically have access to Entra ID. Users of these services can take advantage of the services within Entra ID and also enhance their Microsoft Entra implementation by upgrading your users to Entra ID P1 or P2 or any of the premium licensing. Not only that, though, we do have the Identity Secure Score piece, which helps you as an administrator measure your identity security posture, plan identity security improvements, such as, use MFA or deprecate legacy authentication protocols, and review the success of your improvements. Just to cover a bit of basic terminology as well, because of course this will be referenced during today's session. A tenant is just an instance of Entra, which information about a single organization resides, including objects such as users, groups, devices, and app registrations. A directory, right? The term directory is used interchangeably. Basically, a directory is like a database or a catalog of identities and resources associated with an organizational tenant, including users, groups, applications, and devices. Entra ID tenant consists of only one directory as it stands, but you can have multiple directories associated to the one directory. And then, of course, a multi-tenant situation has more than one instance of Microsoft Entra ID. Reasons why an organization might have multiple tenants include multiple subsidiaries or business units that operate independently, or an organization that has a merge or acquires another organization, multiple geographical boundaries, and regulations. So just think of Microsoft Entra ID as a fully pledged identity and access management service. So there are different types of identities within Entra ID itself. When you ask the questions, what can I assign identity in Microsoft Entra ID? There tend to be three categories, right? You can assign identities to people, albeit you. Example identity assigned to people are employees of an organization that are typically configured as internal users. External users that include customers, consultants, vendors, and partners. For our purposes, we'll refer to these as kind of user identities. You can assign identity to a physical device, such as a mobile phone, desktop, computer, and IoT device, an Internet of Things device. And lastly, you can assign identities to software-based objects, such as applications, virtual machines, services, and containers. And these tend to be referred to as workload identities. So what we'll do now, we'll do a quick demo in the Microsoft Entra ID portal. We'll navigate to entra.microsoft.com and we'll run through creating a user, looking at some authentication methods, as well as being able to manage groups and applications. So give me one moment and I'll bring up. Cool. So what I've got here is I've got an in-private browser and I'm navigating to entra.microsoft.com. I'm going to go log in. Give me 2 moments, guys. As you see, I'm going through the authentication and authorization process now. And if any, it will request me to authenticate myself through MFA. For this particular account, I've got the Authenticator app set up. So it's asking me to complete what we like to call number matching. I'm just typing in the number on my mobile phone at the moment. And then what we should see that it authorizes me to access my, what we like to call directory, right? So from the outset, this is Microsoft Entra ID. This is more than just a lift and shift of Active Directory domain services from on-prem to cloud. From the outset, you'll get a dashboard with a whole load of security and health advisory information, as well as some quick navigation panes to access maybe your users in your organization, groups, devices, sign-in logs. We talked about auditing earlier, that if we've got premium licensing, we get 30 days worth of audit login, 7 days whether or not we're free. Roles, the ability to assign role-based access control to our users, whether or not we're selecting the predefined roles provided by Microsoft or custom roles, we can create and decipher. And then setting up the authentication methods, whether or not that be Windows Hello for Business, the Authenticator app, passkeys, which are now FIDO2 Alliance keys, that type of stuff. And then, of course, the Identity Secure Score, which we touched base on, which is a representation of your organizational security posture and the opportunity to improve it by taking up security recommendations. And then we've got some information around billing and licensing, i.e. how many NCE licenses have I purchased for my license, for my organization, how many of those licenses are available to be assigned. On the left-hand side, this is a very familiar feel for any other solution we access in Microsoft and their service portfolio. You'll get a left-hand service pane where we've got identity. We've got protection, which is all around security, such as identity protection and conditional access. We've got identity governance to be able to manage our identity lifecycle through the likes of entitlement management packages and access reviews. And then we've got global secure access right down at the bottom, which is all around web content filtering and private access, which was previously known as application proxy, which is the ability to bring not just web apps, but non-web applications from on-premise to the cloud, so we can enact the protection capabilities in the cloud on our line of business apps, which are hosted on-prem. So the first things first, we want to select overview. And this will take us to the overview pane of our directory where we can see the tenant ID, right? This is the unique identifier for our organization. And this is set up as in when you set up your Microsoft 365 tenant. The overriding license for the organization, At this point, you can see my tenant has got Entra ID P2 licenses. That's because my users are on Microsoft 365 E5. The amount of users in my organization, as well as security groups, applications, and devices. And like I said, those devices could be corporate or they could be personally owned, whereas they're registered. So if I select users and all users, you'll see a list of users in my directory. Funny enough, you got myself, you got Steve in the room, and you've got a whole load of test users, right? And I think the important thing to note here is that these are all fully pledged corporate users I've created via my admin account. And these are not being synced up from on-prem. As we can see, the on-prem column here is set to no for all my users. So I can tell you now these are all cloud-only identities. And the user type is member. They're not a guest. So these are not people we've invited from external to access my resource internally. Okay, if I was to access one of the user profiles here, this will take you to a user profile card where I can see the alias or SMTP address assigned to my user account, when the account was created, what type of user this is, are they assigned to any given roles, what license have they got assigned, are they assigned to any applications, that type of stuff. There's a whole load of information. If I was to click properties, we can see a bit more. So we can see the schema of the user here, right? What location do they reside? What's their data sovereignty? Have they got a usage location assigned? Are there any controls around this particular account? When was their last sign-in attempt made? This information is really important if you're using what we like to call dynamic security groups, in which we want to move away from the static one-to-one mapping of users in security groups to more of a dynamic way of placing users into security groups. So we can say, okay, we're going to create a group for sales, and what I need to make sure is that all my users have a department listed as sales, and then all those users with the department listed as sales will go into that group automatically, and that alleviates a whole load of overhead from my internal IT support team. Okay, we've got some quick fire action task buttons at the top. I can edit the properties, I can delete the user. I think from a deleting user perspective, especially for the exam, once you delete a user, you have 30 days to recover the deleted user from the kind of the deleted user pane. And then of course that will restore everything we had previously. We can reset the password. From an Entra ID perspective, it will create a password for you on your behalf. If we were to go into the Microsoft 365 Admin Center, we can define a password or ask Microsoft to define it for us. And then, of course, we can revoke sessions. We talked about modern authentication earlier and how the IDP provider is now the orchestrator of the access tokens. Well, that access token is short-lived, so it lives between 35 to 55 minutes, and that's issued by what we like to call the primary refresh token. And let's say you know, someone is leaving on maybe bad terms from your organization, you've restricted their account. Doesn't necessarily mean they can't access their account for the period of time the access token is active, which is 30 to 55 minutes. Because of course, when the PRT token does a poll to the Entra ID service and sees the account is blocked, that will then of course revoke the access token, but not until the existing access token has lapsed. So what you want to do here is revoke sessions, and that will revoke the access token, full stop. On the user profile card, we've got the sign-in logs, where we can see exactly where the user is signing in from, what time. Did they go through a process of MFA? Was it a successful sign-in attempt? Was it a failure? Why was it a failure, if any? Can you provide me the correlation ID and the error code? But you can see here I've signed in 336 at some point. You can see who signed in. You can see what application they're trying to access. Was it successful, and the IP address associated in the location, right? And whether or not they went through the process of single-factor authentication or multi-factor authentication. And the great thing here is if I click into one of the sign-in attempts, I can see whether or not MFA was successful, whether or not they're using continuous access evaluation. So continuous access evaluation is the ability to revoke tokens, just like the revoke sessions on the previous pane, at near real time, right? Based on a critical event. Whether or not that critical event is you've deleted a user, you've blocked their user account, you've removed their license, that kind of stuff. If we scroll down, we've got a whole lot more information around the user ID, the home tenant they're signing in to, right? This is useful if you've got a multi-tenant setup where maybe you've acquired another business and you've got multi-tenant organization set up. That's a good indicative of whether or not they're authenticating on the home tenant or destination tenant. And then, of course, if I scroll down slightly more, I can see who the issuer of the token is. We talked about a security token earlier. The issuer of this current token is Microsoft Entra ID, because Entra ID is the IDP provider from this perspective. I think other than that, the only other important thing to note here is token protection. So as much as MFA is secure and MFA reduces potential compromise by 99.2%, that 0.8% remaining, there is the ability for either threat vectors to steal your token through what we like to call adversary in the middle attacks. And that is solely because the access token is not bound to your laptop or your trusted platform module on your laptop. Therefore, Microsoft have given you the ability to enact what we like to call token protection so that the access token is bound and it can't be compromised, right? And the way we enact that is through what we like to call conditional access. We've got location, a bit more detailed device info, auth details, and conditional access tab. The report only tab is if we've created a conditional access tab, conditional access policy, and we've put the conditional access policy in report only mode, which is pretty much audit mode. So we want to see what the intended output would be if that policy was indeed active. So assigned roles. This is where, of course, we see the roles assigned to the user account. At this point in time, you can see that my user account is a global administrator. This is a direct membership. That could be indirect based on whether or not I've assigned a role to a security group and added my user to that security group. And this is a permanent assignment. We looked at the zero trust methodology earlier around least privileged access and role-based access control. Where we can use what we like to call privileged identity management if we got Entra ID Plan 2 licenses, which is the ability to provide just in time and just enough access for our user profiles. So say, for example, we've got a contractor coming in to complete a statement of work for 2 weeks, and they need the security administrator role for those 2 weeks. We could opt into privileged identity management, and we can say, okay, this contractor can elevate themselves into this role for the time span of 2 weeks. After 2 weeks, that role is automatically removed. How that helps you as an administrator is you don't need to remember, one, to remove the role after they completed the work they set out to do or complete. And two, you can provide them the least amount of access to complete the job they need to carry out. And that's the whole art of the impossible with PIM, right? We've got admin units here, which is the ability to divide divisions, right? So say, for example, you've got a UK ARM team and you've got a US ARM team. UK ARM team has an IT team, which manage those UK members, and same principle for US. They've got a US IT team and they manage the US users. And you don't want the US IT team managing the UK users. You can segment that through administrative units and you can assign roles based on who you want to manage who. Groups from an Entra ID perspective, we can assign security groups or Microsoft 365 groups, right? Within Microsoft 365 Admin Center, we can create distribution lists, we can create Microsoft 365 now enabled groups, and a few other Teams associated groups as well. But I think from my perspective, all you really need to know from the exam is you could create security and Microsoft 365 groups in Entra. Licenses. This is where, of course, I was going to say you can assign licenses, but Microsoft have deprecated it now, so you have to assign licenses in the Microsoft 365 admin portal, but you still got visibility in terms of the licenses within Microsoft Entra here anyway. So we could see my user has signed an E5 license, we've got a Copilot license, and we've also got a privacy risk management license for our DSR requests, our data subject requests, as well as a Power Automate free license, which I assume has just come with one of the other licenses. Devices. This is where we can see whether or not my user got a device. So this user doesn't necessarily have a device, but if I was to go into devices over here and click all devices and scroll out slightly, you can see I've got a whole load of list of devices here enrolled through what we like to call Windows Autopilot. The way we distinguish that it's a Windows Autopilot device is that it's got a purple symbol rather than a blue symbol, right? And if for all those people on the today's session who don't know what an autopilot device is, it's basically a seamless way of deploying devices to our end users out the box, right? That's kind of high level. What that means in essence is we can go to whoever we're procuring the devices off of. We can ask for what we like to call a hardware hash ID, export the CSV, import it into Microsoft Intune. Either the people you're procuring the device off can do that on your behalf for a small service fee, or you could do it manually by exporting the hardware hash ID off via PowerShell or through Access Work or School or through on the box itself. Then once you've done that, you create your policies and you can send out the kit straight to the end user without any, let's say, imaging the machine. They just type in their Entra ID credentials and it all just does it for you. It configures the applications, it could join the user to the device, and it can check the hardware prereqs of the device, meet the relevant standards for the likes of Windows Hello for Business, for example. Like I said, if you want to break out a session at any point for Windows Autopilot, we've got a TCOE arm here at West Coast who can help you and enable you on these types of solutions. It's not a problem. Join type here is important for the exam, right? So Entra join means it's fully corporately managed, right? This machine was provided by the organization. This is a corporate machine. This is not a personal machine, and it's got full access to our resources in the cloud. Registered would mean it's personal, it's BYOD. You've went home, you're using your own kit to access work resources. That's a registered device, okay? And of course, you can see what type of device it is and who's assigned what device. Other than that, just to finish off the Entra ID, because this is just the SC-900, so fundamental, so we don't need to go into depth with the solutions. But like I said, if you do want to go in depth at some point, you can always reach out to technology at West Coast Cloud and we can conduct an enablement session on this. Identity protection is all around near real-time risk detection. So Microsoft employ over 10,000 threat intelligence experts. And with that, for every sign-in attempt made, they've got a whole load of risk signals they're trying to identify. Whether or not that's impossible travel, let's say I'm here in Reading now, I can't be in the US within 30 minutes. That's impossible travel. Therefore, my admins would receive an alert based on that user potentially being compromised or flagged as high risk. Or it could be atypical travel that I tend to sign into my account Monday to Friday, 8 a.m. till 5 p.m. But for some reason on a Sunday, I'm signing in from Russia at 4 p.m. That's atypical, right? So my admins would receive an email. And then based on not just receiving an email, not just identifying that user as risky, I can integrate that with conditional access and restrict that user from accessing the corporate resources or require a level of strong authentication. So just to finish off with, the conditional access is here. We will probably break out into conditional access in a brief moment on another slide, but this is just to show you where conditional access actually sits within the Entra ID portal. So that's a quick demo on Entra ID. Like I said, any other questions around that, just let me know. But we're going to quickly move on to the B2B, business to business collaboration piece. So there are different types of external identities in Microsoft Entra ID. And what I really want you to take away from this slide is B2B collaboration, which is the ability to collaborate with external users by letting them use their preferred identity to sign into your resources, and business to customer. Right, and bear with me, guys. Sorry. Yeah, so let's start with business to business, right? Business to business collaboration enables employees of an organization to collaborate with external users while able to use their preferred identities to sign into your Microsoft or other enterprise applications. User typically represented in your directory as guest users. So where we went into Entra ID and we saw the user type member, you could confirm or affirm they were fully corporate users. But if they were a B2B user, they would show up as guest, right? Business to customer is where you want a consumer to access an app you've developed using their preferred social identity. So on the right hand side, you've got a website. This looks like a grocery website. There's a whole load of social ID providers there, such as Google, Microsoft, Personal, and Facebook. This is the ability to allow your external users to use those types of social ID methods to sign into your given website. That's business to customer, right? And then we got multi-tenant organizations where maybe an organization's been acquired or they've done a merger or acquisition, and you want, you've got separate tenants, so you need to consolidate them but you can't do a full migration at the moment. So you're just going to connect the two. So they act as if they were internal employees. So for example, West Coast Group, West Coast Cloud, right? Kind of separate tenants. We've got a multi-tenant organization all set up. But however, we're still able to speak on Microsoft Teams as if we were internal colleagues, right? And they show up in the global address list. And there's no difference between if it was a single tenant or multiple tenant setup. Hybrid identity, simply put, is where we synchronize identities from on-prem Active Directory domain services up to Microsoft Entra ID. And many organizations include a mixture of both cloud and on-prem applications, so they need this typical setup. However, regardless of whether an application is hosted on-prem or in the cloud, you still expect and require easy access. And with the use of Entra Connect, we can install an agent on our local server, which has line of sight to our domain controller. And with that, we're able to decipher what type of organizational units, such as users and devices, we want to be able to sync up to Entra ID. And there is the ability to also conduct what we like to call password write-back. So the source of authority will always be on-prem AD, but if I was to reset the password in the cloud, I could enable password write-back, and that password would then be able to be synced back down to my local domain controller, then in return reset the password for the user account. Alternatively, we've got device write-back as well. And other than that, you just need to understand that Entra Connect is the kind of the fully supported kind of recommended way of synchronizing identities from on-prem to cloud. But there is also something called Entra Cloud Sync, right? Entra Cloud Sync is a lightweight agent you can install on your domain controller, has lower dependencies versus Entra Connect. However, can't scale as much as Entra Connect in regards to the schemas, the extension attributes, and only supports one forest rather than multiple forests, right? From an exam perspective, that's what you really need to know. Into module 1, we're going to start looking at explore the authentication capabilities of Microsoft Entra. So we'll look at describing the authentication methods of Microsoft Entra ID, describing multi-factor authentication in Entra ID, what it is, and describe password protection and management capabilities in Microsoft Entra ID. So typically we would have a password, right? Passwords are great until you see the latest Microsoft Digital Defense report, where 97 to 98% of known compromises are due to lack of MFA and weak passwords being used. Albeit the most weak password to date is password 123, right? So came up with an idea, or Microsoft have, or someone has, around two-factor authentication. Right, this is the ability to not only use your password, but also use a second layer of authentication, whether or not that be your authenticator app on your phone, Microsoft Authenticator app that is, whether or not it be maybe a FIDO2 passkey you plug into your laptop to authenticate yourself. It could be Windows Hello for Business. It could be a whole load of different peripheral authentication methods, which we're going to go through in a second. But it's a two-layer approach to security. And MFA typically is something you know, such as your password, something you have, could be a physical phone, could be a physical YubiKey, and something you are, such as biometrics, such as your face, such as your fingerprint, that type of stuff. And there are different ways we can enforce multi-factor authentication in Microsoft or in Entra ID. We can enforce it through conditional access, through the Entra ID P1, P2 licensing, which tends to be the most recommended way because we've got granularity in regards to name locations, compliant device, making sure your device is a hybrid state, that type of stuff. We can enforce it through security defaults, right? Which is just kind of a blanket all approach. We're going to enforce everyone with multi-factor authentication, or previously per user MFA, which is on the deprecation path by September 2025. Okay, and if not already, you should be migrating your authentication methods from per user MFA to new authentication methods played in Entra. But like I said, the recommended way of enforcing MFA tends to be conditional access. Reason being, you get a whole lot more granularity, especially if you've got break-glass accounts or service accounts or accounts that don't support the use of modern authentication. Then you've got the ability to whitelist, but still enforce majority of MFA across your user base. Okay, but once more, that's an Entra ID P1 license at a minimum. If you want to integrate that with identity protection, with the whole risk-based prioritization or risk-based levels, such as low, medium, high, then you need a P2 license through either E5 or standalone. Okay, but of course, most of our customer base are SMB, right, where they've got a business premium license, and business premium already includes the use of Entra ID P1, so you should be able to use and create conditional access policies. So lots of different authentication methods in Microsoft Entra, and you've probably all got the Authenticator app on your phone. You probably already go through the process of number matching. If we step back a year or two ago, it used to be a push notification, right, where you type in your Entra ID username, password, notification will come up on your phone, then you would press approve on your phone. The problem with that was something called user fatigue came into play, where a threat vector would just keep guessing your password correctly. You'll keep receiving the notification, and at some point, you as a user get fed up and you just press approve on your mobile device. That's what we like to call user fatigue. Or alternatively, it's someone tries to call up the help desk. The help desk has very little security ratification processes, and they just go ahead and go, okay, we're going to reset your MFA authentication methods, or we're going to approve of such request. So Microsoft needed to improve that mechanism and that capability. So they thought, okay, let's move it to more number matching. What number matching means is, of course, we've got a number appears on your laptop and on your a number appears on your phone, and you've got to match that with what's on the laptop, etc. And what that helps with is, of course, engaging the human brain, right? You've actually got to think about what you're putting into the box rather than just hitting approve. And not only that, it will give you the geographic region of where that authentication is coming from, and what application is destined to be accessed from that perspective. So they have stepped up their game in regards to security. And what's even better is, Microsoft are trying to introduce what we like to call phishing resistant methods, such as FIDO2 keys, Windows Hello for Business, certificate-based auth, that type of stuff. Why is that so important is it's very difficult to compromise those types of authentication methods, hence why they're phishing resistant methods, just due to the sheer fact that you've got to be in front of that physical kit to authenticate yourself. Unless the kit gets stolen, it can't be compromised, right? Windows Hello for Business, you've got to be in front of your laptop to show your face and authenticate. If it's fingerprint, for example, you've got to have your finger and you've got to touch the laptop to authenticate. And if it's a hardware key or a UB key, you've got to physically plug it into your laptop. It's pretty difficult to compromise that. With, of course, the use of Authenticator app, SMS, phone call, very weak types of authentication, and just having a password alone, yeah, is really not good. So the world is moving quite quickly. And as you know it, probably in the next year or so, lots of people will be using moving to passwordless authentications. Of course, the question always arises, right? Okay, what if the user, can't authenticate, or the passwordless authentication stops working? How do we bootstrap our way back in to the laptop? We've got something called temporary access pass, which you can now issue in Microsoft Entra ID to get yourself back into the physical account itself. Okay. Of course, we've also got this option around self-service password reset, or known as SSPR, which is the ability for your users to reset their own passwords without having to contact the internal service desk team or support team. So what this means in essence from an end user experience is they can access a browser, they can navigate to aka.ms/SSPR, and that will ask them to enter their email address, and then complete a captcha as well. And then after that, it will ask them to authenticate through their second factor. Once they've authenticated through their second factor, they're then able to reset their password. Whether or not they've forgotten their password or just want to change it, the same principle applies. They can access that given site and they can reset their password. So move on to the next one. Password protection. Of course, we do have the ability to configure lockout thresholds, right? Most of us probably got an iPhone, right? Type in your PIN code 5 times wrong, it locks you out for 30 seconds, then a minute, then 5 minutes, so on and so forth. Same principle here. We can set out lockout thresholds, also lockout durations, custom ban list. right? Microsoft have their own defined custom ban list, i.e. you can't just use password or password 123, that type of stuff. That will be banned by the Microsoft Threat Intelligence team and by their machine learning. But you can also define your own custom ban list based and tailored around your organization. So if it's West Coast, for example, we may block West Coast, or with the different abbreviations as well, the numerical characters. West Coast 123, capital W, lowercase e, or dollar dollar. You know, we could block that. That's not a problem through the use of the protection capabilities in Entra ID. And not only that, this can integrate with on-prem Active Directory domain services as well. So we can enable these password protection policies not only in the cloud, but also on-prem. So we can explore some of the access management capabilities on Microsoft Entra. So we're just looking at role-based access control from this perspective and kind of demystifying the piece around Entra ID roles versus Azure RBAC roles. They're completely different role permissions and role models, and it's something we really need to understand. But before we do that, we'll go look at conditional access. So simplest form of conditional access, right? Conditional access is if-then statements, right? If this happens, then what should we do? Right. And the way conditional access policies are kind of structured are assignment scope, who you applying this conditional access policy to, conditions, what needs to be satisfied, right? Whether or not it's maybe a non-compliant device or a location or a particular device you're signing in from, and the access control. Okay. The access control could be block completely, or allow but require multi-factor authentication, or allow but require a particular set of strong authentication strengths, or session persistency, where in which we want to re-authenticate every 2 to 3 minutes. There's a whole art of the impossible conditional access, and it's a really, really good solution to adopt in any good practice when trying to increase security and reduce overall exposure. So let's have a quick look at conditional access and the type of policies we can create. Quickly minimize that. And I'm going to bring up Entra ID. Cool. So back into Entra ID. And what we want to do, kick off from home. So you've got a fresh slate. So when you type in entra.microsoft.com, of course, you need to be a global administrator or conditional access administrator to administer conditional access policies. We want to scroll down to where we see conditional access under protection, or alternatively, search in the search bar at the top. But when we select conditional access, this will take us to a policy snapshot where it will indicatively tell us how many conditional access policies we've got enabled and currently in audit mode. So we looked at the signing logs earlier where we saw the conditional access tab, where we saw that report only tab. This is exactly where this is derives from, right? When we put conditional access policies in report only, we can check the signing logs and we can look at the intended output based on that conditional access policy being configured. Howeve, we've still got 4 enabled, right? And how we go about creating conditional access policies is by pressing policies. And straight from the bat, we've got a few options. We can create custom policy. We can create policy from template. Policy from template is brilliant, right? Because without having any kind of technical expertise, I can come in here, I can say, okay, require MFA for all admins, and I can view that policy and I can deploy that out the box, let's say. Require security info registration, which from this perspective would be kind of registering the authentication methods for single self-service password reset. Block legacy authentication, whether or not we want to block IMAP, POP, those types of protocols, non-modern auth protocols, and require MFA for all users. And this is broken down into key areas. And we looked at zero trust earlier. So we can click onto zero trust and it'll give us all the policies based on or aligned to the zero trust methodology. Okay, so they're the templates we can create. If I come back out of here, we've got what I like to call Microsoft Managed Policies. Microsoft Managed Policies were introduced around a year ago now, where Microsoft were reviewing existing states with applicable licensing, in this case, Entra ID P1 and P2 licenses, for those who weren't already using conditional access. Okay, and what Microsoft were trying to do was push out their own mandated conditional access policies and say, okay, if you're not going to push out conditional access policies, e.g. the end user, then we are on your behalf, right? It doesn't mean they were going to be put in enabled mode straight away. They were actually put in report only mode for 90 days, and after the 90 days, they would lapse over to enabled. But it gave that period of time for the admin to review and see whether or not that conditional access policy was applicable for their organization. and at least engage that admin's brain to say, you should really be adopting conditional access rather than not having any MFA at all, kind of thing. But it did have a bit of intelligence, right? That if you already had pre-existing conditional access policies in play, it wouldn't just push out conditional access policies for the sake of it. Hence why this sandbox environment's got 0 at the moment, because of course we already had pre-existing CA policies in play. And the way we create conditional access policies, custom ones, we can press new policy, right? Very simple. And what we want to do is give it a name straight away. So we'll just give this test v1, and I'm just going to go through the process to create a conditional access policy. I'm not entirely sure why I'm creating it at the moment, but we'll just go through and see what we end up with. So assignment is who we assigning this to, right? Whether or not that's to all users, or maybe we can select an individual user, or what we like to call business-to-business user earlier we went through, or a particular directory role. Let's say this is being targeted to only global administrators in my organization, right? But if I select a directory role, just for an FYI for all on the call, there's a new role called AI Administrator, and this role itself allows you to manage everything Copilot related. Okay, that's a relatively new role. But I could say, okay, let's say anyone in the global admin. Sorry, trying to navigate one screen here. Anyone in the global administrator role is going to be targeted by this conditional access policy. However, we've got a break-glass account we want to exclude for the time being, just while we test the policy itself. You could do that if needs be. Once we've done that, we then need to assign a target resource. So, great, we've targeted or assigned this to global administrators. What do they need to access for this conditional access policy to enact? Well, we can select an individual application, or we can select all resources, formerly known as all cloud apps, right? That's another change Microsoft recently made because, of course, we're not just targeting cloud apps anymore, cloud applications. There is so much more than just cloud apps now in Microsoft Entra ID, such as the global secure access solution we talked about earlier in regards to bringing up not just web apps, but also non-web applications from on-prem to the cloud. We could target those as well, which means we could bring our cloud protection capabilities to our on-premise applications. But I could say, okay, all resources, select resources, and I could type in maybe the admin portals, right? So any global administrator accessing the Microsoft 365 admin portals, if needs be, I can set up a name location. So I can say, okay, if my users are in the office, they don't need to go through the process of MFA. If they're outside the office, then they do need to, right? So I can maybe include this. I can say any network, but exclude my trusted location possibility. I'm going to leave that as is for the time being. Conditions. What needs to be satisfied for this conditional access policy to kind of take precedence? Well, we can integrate what we like to call identity protection, which I talked about earlier, which is the ability to introduce identity protection risk-based signals with conditional access, which is the P2 functionality. So I can say, okay, if my user is medium or high risk based on impossible travel, which we talked about earlier, then I need to block this user account. Once again, a whole load of capability there. Insider risk is all around elevated risk levels within insider risk management within Microsoft Purview. And the indicator of this would be exfiltration activity, such as Rio normally downloads 5 files a week from his SharePoint document library, but now he's downloading 5,000 files from his document library in the space of 24 hours. That's an exfiltration activity we probably want to be we want to know about, and we also want to assign a level of risk to that user, right? And the indicator may be that user is actually leaving the organization in 5 days' time, and they've just downloaded 5,000 emails in 24 hours or 5,000 documents. We want to associate some sort of risk around that user. We can configure this to block them. Device platform, Windows, iOS, macOS, Android, you name it, it's there. Locations as well. That's the same principle of that. It's just Microsoft haven't got around to deprecating that location tab, right? And clients apps is around deprecating legacy auth. Grant controls is where, okay, once they've satisfied the conditions, what do we want to do? Do we want to block access completely? Or do we want to grant access? Totally up to you, right? We can grant access and say, actually, I'm going to require MFA. Or I can grant access and I say, okay, we're going to grant access, but I want you to go through the process of MFA, and I also want your device to be marked as compliant via Microsoft Intune. before you access my corporate resources. So in this instance, we've set up a policy to say, okay, assign this to global administrators. Any admins, any global admins accessing the admin portals, satisfying any condition, because I haven't set one out, I need them to go through MFA and their device to be marked as compliant before they can access the admin portals, right? That's a conditional access policy. And like I said, there's hundreds, thousands of different ways we can create this based on preference, right? And we can put this in report only, which is audit mode, which is at the bottom here, or enable from the bat or off, right? And that's CA. Brilliant. So if I minimize this quickly, come back to here. Now we've got role-based access control, and from this slide, I'm going to use this as a reference point. And what we really want to take away from here is there are two, I don't want to say two, but there's probably three types of roles we can assign to a user in Microsoft, right? We've got Microsoft Entra ID roles, which give you the ability to access, let's say, Entra ID, Defender XDR, Microsoft Intune, Viva Engage, you name it, a whole load of different solutions. We've got Azure RBAC roles, which are roles you assign to either you assign to a user at the subscription level, the resource group level, or the resource level, based on what you want them to administer or access. Okay, so from an Azure perspective, let's say someone's sole job every day is to turn on a virtual machine so people can access their resources, right? We can assign them a role at the resource level, at the virtual machine level, and say that role is just virtual machine contributor, so that they can only turn on the machine and machine only. They can't do anything else, just turn on that virtual machine. And then I'm going to delve into the third of four roles, with the fourth roles we can assign. So global administrator, there's a bit of a misconception around that, right? It does provide access to majority all services. Let's get that right, it does. But there are 5 to 10% of things it doesn't give you access to. So if you were to go into Defender XDR, for example, which is Microsoft's EDR solution or XDR solution, you wouldn't be able to do everything in there because they've got their own unified RBAC model, role-based access control model. Microsoft Purview, for example, great. I can create protection labels. I can create information barriers. So I can restrict two-way communication. I can enact data loss prevention. So I can show policy tips when people send confidential information outside my organization, that kind of stuff. That's fine. But if you actually want to physically see that data through the likes of a content search, you need a RBAC role in the Purview portal itself. Rather than an Entra role, rather than an Azure RBAC role, you need a Purview role. So take away one thing, right? You can assign Entra roles, you can take away Azure roles, and you can take away unified roles. They're kind of different roles you can assign to a user. And of course, you can use Microsoft's predefined roles, which there are several hundred predefined roles, or you can use, you can create your own custom roles, right? And when you create your own custom roles, you assign what we like to call role permissions in those custom roles, which define exactly the read-write executions you can use to complete certain actions. Okay, and I think the next slide is I was going to show you the roles quickly before we move on. So when we're in the portal here, trying to find my mouse in the portal, there'll be an option somewhere along the lines of roles. So if I scroll down and press show more, you see roles and admins. When I click roles and admins, this is Entra roles, right? These are Entra roles, not Azure roles, Entra roles. And there's hundreds of these, hundreds, based on what we need to do. Whether or not it's set up conditional access policy, we're going to assign a conditional access role. Whether or not it's set up or manage the billing, we can give a billing role. Or maybe we just want to manage the devices, we can give a device role. And the way Microsoft have categorized this is through privilege tags. So I can filter here, and I can define exactly what roles are privileged and what roles are not, which is quite funny, right? Because all roles are privileged because you're given access to what they didn't necessarily have access to in the first place. But these are just more privileged roles than the normal privileged roles, if that makes sense. And of course, we can scroll to the right, we can see which ones are built in. Of course, alternatively, we can create our own custom roles at the top here, where we can give it a custom role name, give it a description. We can clone from an existing role or start our own role. Press next. And then, of course, we can define the role permissions, which I talked about earlier, in the given role, right? So, Rio, you said there's Azure roles. What are Azure roles then? Well, if you go to portal.azure.com, this will take you to the Azure Management Portal. And what we've got in here is a subscription. And like I said, roles in Azure could be assigned at a subscription level. You can also assign to the management group level, but we're not going to get into that. But you can assign to the subscription level, the resource group level, or the resource level. Here's my Azure sub called SPF Azure Plan. So click into this, you'll see a pane here called Access Control, Identity and Access Management. I can click into the Access Control pane, and then I've got an option for role assignments. And this is where I can assign a role at the subscription level. Anything assigned at the subscription level, I can then manage as a user any of the resources underneath. It works on a hierarchy kind of situation, right? And you can see there's a whole load of users in this sub assigned owner access at this level, right? So that means any resources associated to subscription, I can manage. So if I was to go into settings here and click resources, and I can see I've got a key vault, right? Got a key vault created. So this key vault sits underneath my subscription. That means I can manage this because I'm assigned the role at the subscription level. If I was to click on the key vault, I could probably go into IAM and I could probably check the role assignment and it will say inherited. See subscription inherited because I've assigned the role at the subscription level rather than this resource level. But if I assigned a permission at this level, I could only manage this resource and this resource only. So hopefully you've understood that. So that's the Azure roles, Entra roles, Azure roles. Purview roles we can get into quickly just to move on with. So if I was to add a new tab and type in purview.microsoft.com, this will take you to what we like to call the compliance policy, the compliance portal, or previously known as the compliance portal, right? And like I said, being global administrator doesn't necessarily mean you got access to everything. So I can create a protection policy, but I wouldn't be able to see the data within in Data Explorer. So what you need to do is click here, roles and scopes, and then we got what we like to call role groups. And these are the typical unified roles we need to assign in the given solution itself to access the stuff we need to access. Okay, so they're the three types of roles, right? You need to know for the exam. So if I come back out of here, I'll just try and find my mouse. Okay, let's minimize this. Come back in here. Cool. So move on. So describe the identity governance capabilities of Microsoft Entra, privileged identity management, capabilities of Microsoft Entra identity protection, and permissions management. So of course, identities have a life cycle, right? The life cycle starts from when the user starts in the business to when the user leaves the business, and we need to be able to manage that identity life cycle from what access they have to what group they have to what level of roles they have. We need a way to be able to oversee that and manage that deposition review, right? And Microsoft Entra Identity Governance gives organizations the ability to do the following tasks, right? Like I said, manage identity lifecycle, govern access lifecycle through roles, and secure privileged access for administration. And these actions can be completed for employees, whether or not those employees are B2B, vendors, across different services and applications, both on-prem and in the cloud. It's intended to help organizations address kind of four key questions, right? Which users should have access to which resources? What are those users doing with that access? Are there effective organizational controls for managing access? And can auditors verify that the controls are working? And it typically starts off with the identity lifecycle, which is kind of managing users' identity lifecycle at the heart of the identity governance. When planning identity lifecycle management for employees, for example, many organization models use a join, move, and leave process. And when an individual first joins an organization, a new identity is created if one isn't already available. And when an individual moves between organizational boundaries, such as departments, more access authorizations may need to be added or removed to their digital identity. And finally, when an identity leaves, access may no longer be needed and need to be removed, and the identity may no longer be required. So we need to be able to manage that at scale. And of course, Microsoft has a few different solutions to be able to manage the identity governance, the identity lifecycle. One being access reviews, which helps organizations to efficiently manage group memberships, access to enterprise apps, role assignments, ensure that only the right people have access to the resources, and review and manage access for internal users and guests. Access reviews are typically useful and helpful when you have too many users in privileged roles, such as global admins, when automation is impossible, such as when HR data isn't in Entra. You want to control business critical data access, and your governance policies require periodic reviews of access of permissions. We can have multi-stage access reviews. So Microsoft Entra access reviews support up to 3 review stages in which multiple stages of reviewers engage and determine who needs access to the company resources. The multi-stage access reviews allow you and your organization to enable complex workflows to meet recertification and audit requirements, calling for multiple reviewers to attest to access for users in particular sequence. Also helps you design more efficient reviews for your resource owners and auditors by reducing the number of decisions each reviewer is accountable for. We've also got entitlement management, and this is a governance feature that enables organizations to manage identity and access lifecycle at scale. So entitlement management automates access requests, workflows, access assignments, reviews, and typically revocation or expiration. Most organizations face challenges when managing employee access to resources, such as users may not know what access they should have, or if they do, they might have difficulty locating the right individuals to approve it. When users find or receive access to a resource, they may hold on to access longer than required for business purposes and manage their access for those external users. And entitlement management tends to include capabilities to address these challenges, where we're not allowed to delegate the creation of access packages to non-admins. These access packages contain resources that users can request. The access packages the managers can define policies that include rules such as which users can request access, who must approve their access, and when their access expires. From managing external users, like when a user who isn't yet in your directory requests access and is approved, they're automatically invited into your directory and assigned access. When their access expires, if they have no other access packages assignments, their business account in your directory will be automatically removed. And this is a feature of Entra Premium P2. There's also terms of use, which allows information to be presented to users before they access particular data or application. Terms of use ensure users read relevant disclaimers for legal or compliance requirements, and employees or guests can be required to set terms of use kind of in the following situations. Maybe when they're accessing sensitive data or on a recurrent schedule, they need to be reminded of particular regulations, or when terms of use are required in different languages or based on user attributes. There's a whole load of different scenarios you could require terms of use for. We'll then start looking at privileged identity management, and this is a service in Entra that enables you to manage, control, and monitor access to important resources in your organization. These include resources in Microsoft Entra itself, Azure, other Microsoft online services such as Microsoft 365 or Microsoft Intune, and it typically mitigates the risk of excessive, unnecessary, or misused access permissions. It requires justification to understand why users want permissions and enforces MFA if needs be to activate any given role. And if you take anything away, it's really kind of just in time, providing privileged access only when needed and not before. It's time bound by assigning a start and end time that indicates when a user can access a resource. There are approval-based requests requiring specific approvals to activate privileges. Visibility in regards to sending notifications when roles are activated to your admin, for example, and audits. So it allows a full access history to be downloaded. And once again, this is included in Microsoft Entra Premium P2. And as I said earlier, around the whole scenario and analogy around, you may have someone coming into your business for a couple of weeks and you need to provide at least amount of access for a particular amount of time. You could do that through the use of privileged identity management. Identity protection is a tool that allows organizations to accomplish three key tasks, really, right? Automate the detection and remediation of identity-based risks in near real time, investigate risks using data in the portal, and export risk detection data based on third-party utilities for typical analysis, right? Like I said, Microsoft employs over 10,000 threat intelligence employees. Microsoft kind of analyzes trillions of different signals per day. If you saw the latest Microsoft Digital Defense report posted in October, just type into Google, it comes up and it will tell you the exact amount. But yeah, it is literally trillions. And these signals come from learnings that Microsoft acquired over their time monitoring Microsoft Entra ID. And these signals generated by these services are fed into identity protection, and it can be used in tools such as conditional access, which we looked at earlier in regards to, integrating the risk levels. We can also feed these signals into security information event management systems, SIEM solutions such as Sentinel for further investigation, where we can create workbooks and automation and prompts. And once again, this feature is included in Entra ID P2. Cool. So we do a quick knowledge check now. Of course, if you could post your answer in the Q&A box in the team chat, that'd be great. We're starting off with an organization has completed a full migration to the cloud and has purchased devices for all of its employees. All employees sign into the device through an organizational account configured in Microsoft Entra ID. Select the option that best describes how these devices are set up in Entra ID. And there's a real key piece of information in that sentence, right? The organization completed a full migration to the cloud and has purchased devices for all of its employees. And I'm going to minimize my screen. I'm going to have a look at the chat. Give it a minute or so. See if your posts coming through. Yeah, B, you're all right. Enter join devices. The key thing there was, of course, the equipment's been purchased for the users and they're fully corporate devices. They didn't mention anything to do with hybrid identities and didn't mention anything to do with personally registered. After hearing of a breach at a competitor, the security team wants to improve identity security within their organization. What should they implement to provide the greatest protection to user identities? I'll give that a moment. It's all we ever talk about, right? That's the key thing there for identities. A few questions, a few answers coming through. So the answer to the question is MFA, right? After hearing of a breach at a competitor, the security team wants to improve identity security within their organization. What should they? You should always implement MFA, right? We looked at that stat earlier. If you implement MFA, you reduce potential compromise by 99.2%, I want to say, right? And that's just adding that extra level of security on top of your existing passwords. And at some point, passwords will be, I want to say, non-existent. For many organizations, they will still have a requirement for passwords if they're looking at kind of the likes of Cyber Essentials and, trying to get advice from NCSC. But passwordless authentication is definitely around the corner. Cool. One more set of questions. An organization plans to implement conditional access. What do admins need to do? And this is one of those typical Microsoft questions, right? Which could be anything. But what is the first thing you need to do? I think that's what you need to look at that question. The answer to the question, I'm conscious on time, is create policies that enforce organizational rules. Before you do anything, you need to create the policy, right? Last but not least, your IT organization is looking for a solution that provides comprehensive visibility and control over permissions for any identity and any resource in their multi-vendor cloud environment. We didn't touch base on this, which is one I need to add post call here, but just do the process of elimination, right? We've been through what identity protection is, when we've been through what privileged identity management is. PIM being just in time, just enough access, and identity protection being real-time risk detection based on risk signals. So it can only be one other thing, right? Which is permissions management. So we didn't cover that, which I apologize. But really, all that is the ability to manage a whole load of R back in a single pane of glass. And that caters for multi-vendor situations as well. I.e., if you're using AWS, Google Suite, Oracle, you can bring all of it into one kind of single pane of glass, just like Lighthouse, for example, where you can manage a whole load of customers in one particular console. But once again, because it's multiple choice, and we're trying to condense this course into a space of 3 to 4 hours. There may be stuff we haven't touched base on, but of course you've got our content outside of the course via YouTube, via the books, via the learn content you could dive into. Cool. We're going to have a quick 5-10 minute break now. It's 11 o'clock, which is brilliant. We'll carry on at 5 past, so 5 minutes, and we'll crack on again. Cool. Give everyone one more. Oh, there we go. 11:05. We'll kick off. It's about to say one more minute. That time went very fast. Brill. So we'll look at describing capabilities of Microsoft Security in the next module, and then we'll finish off with module 4. So partway through module 3, which is the module we're looking at now, Steve is going to take over, but I'm just going to introduce you to some of the Microsoft security solutions. Then we'll tangent on to some of the Azure security solutions after that. So the learning path and the agenda for this particular module is around describing threat protection within Microsoft 365 Defender. And Defender is very much an umbrella term. You may have heard of it called Defender XDR, which is extended detection and response, and it's a combination of different Microsoft 365 security solutions. Describe capabilities of Microsoft Sentinel, which once again we referenced earlier in regards to that SIEM solution, so that's security identity and event management solution. Describing core infrastructure security services in Azure, such as Azure Bastion, firewall, web application firewall, that type of stuff, and then describe security management capabilities of Azure. So let's first kick off with Microsoft 365 Defender being our threat protection solution in Microsoft. And Microsoft 365 Defender is, once again, like I said, an umbrella solution. It covers a whole load of things, albeit Defender for Office 365 for email collaboration, Defender for Endpoint for physical protection around your thin clients, your laptops, your mobile phones, whether or not that be iOS or Android. Defender for Cloud Apps, which is all around visibility into your applications and being able to enact application hardening, especially in today's evolving world around AI. We're able to look at the generative AI applications people are using within our given organization and the ability to sanction and unsanction those applications. Defender for Identity. So this is one of those solutions where Microsoft are like, okay, we've invested a lot of time into security in the cloud, but what about those people who are still in a hybrid situation where they still have got to not only manage but also secure their on-prem services? So they introduced Defender for Identity, which gives us a level of security around our on-prem infrastructure. Defender Vulnerability Management, which is all around analyzing our software inventory, making sure applications are up to date, and not only applications, but also browser extensions and particular hardware as well. Number 6, Defender Threat Intelligence is all around threat analytics, new and upcoming adversaries, different nation state threats, and gives a whole lot of intel profiles around that and indicators of compromises. So that's Defender from a high level perspective. Microsoft Defender for Office 365 has a seamless integration into your Office 365 subscription that provides protection against your threats that arrive in either email, links, URLs, attachments, or any of the collaboration tools such as SharePoint, Online, Teams, and Outlook. Defender for Office 365 provides a real-time view of threats and tools you can use to stay ahead of potential and upcoming threats. And there's a whole load of out-of-the-box policies you can use to make sure your environment is secure and you're using this to its full potential. One being the preset security policies, which allow you to apply protection features to users based on Microsoft recommended settings. A use case for preset policies during installation. Installation by preset can set up everything for you and is recommended because it automates generally the rollout of your environment. Threat protection policies defines threat protection policies set the appropriate level of protection for your organization. We've got reporting mechanisms, which allows us to view real-time reports to monitor your 365 environment and performance. We've got the threat investigation and response capabilities, which is the Microsoft leading edge tools to investigate, understand, and simulate and prevent threats. And AIR capabilities, or automated investigation and response, which allows you to save time and effort investigating, managing, mitigating risks, especially if you don't have an in-house SOC team or security operations team. And there's a bundle licensing, right? So Defender for Office 365 is available in 2 plans. one being MDO Plan 1 and two being MDO Plan 2. And these services are built upon the core protections offered by Exchange Online Protection. So generally speaking, EOP helps protect broad volume-based known attacks and is present in any subscription where Exchange Online mailboxes can be found, or Exchange Online Plan 1. Defender for Office 365 Plan 1 contains EOP in it and protects email and collaboration from zero-day malware, phishing emails, such as potentially malicious email link you receive, and business email compromise, which is one of those threat campaigns. And Defender for Plan 2 contains Plan 1 capabilities and Exchange Online protection. However, adds post-breach investigation, hunting, response, automation, and simulation for your end users, so education in essence. And the structure is cumulative, as shown in the image, right? So if you purchase Plan 2, you get Plan 1 and EOP capabilities. Plan 1, you get EOP capabilities, so on and so forth. So Defender for Endpoint is a platform designed to help enterprise networks protect endpoints, including laptops, phones, tablets, PCs, access points, routers, whatever it may be, firewalls even. It does so by detecting, investigating, responding to advanced threats. The Defender for Endpoint embeds typical technology into Windows 10 and 11 via a Sense agent you install on your device. And this usually tends to include endpoint behavioral sensors that collect and process telemetry signals from the operating system and send it up to the Defender XDR dashboard. Cloud security analytics that translate kind of behavioral signals into real kind of consumed insights, detections, and recommended responses to enhance threats. And then, of course, threat intelligence that enables Defender for Endpoint to identify attacker tools, techniques, procedures, and generate alerts, and which then, of course, sends to your global administrators from the collected sensor data. In general, we've got kind of how it's kind of formulated, right? It starts off with vulnerability management, which is, like I said, all about a risk-based approach for discovery, assessment, prioritization, and remediation of your misconfigurations in maybe your known apps or browser extensions or certificates that may be due to expire. We've got ASR, which provides kind of like a first line of defense in the Defender for Endpoint stack by ensuring config settings are properly set and kind of exploit mitigation techniques are applied. The capabilities resist attacks and exploitation, and allows you to regulate access to maybe malicious IP addresses, domains, and URLs. Next gen protection is all around kind of MDAV, so which is Microsoft Defender for Antivirus, which all includes the behavior-based, heuristic, and real-time antivirus protection, cloud delivered protection, which includes near instant detection and blocking of new emerging threats, and general day-to-day kind of protection and product refreshes, which includes updates for your laptop and for your computer to make sure you're secure. EDR, which I said, this is not just an EDR solution, this is the XDR solution because it includes all of this lovely stuff, which provides enhanced attack detections near real time, like I said, actionable, consumable, and your security personnel or people or analysts can prioritize alerts, see the full scope of breach, and then take response actions to remediate those threats. And then nearly there, AIR, which is automated investigation response, uses basically inspection algorithms. And it's based on kind of like machine learning, and it's based on processes that are used by kind of security analysts. The capabilities are designed to kind of examine alerts received and incidents received and take immediate action to resolve breaches, which then reduces and alleviates burden from your own internal employees. We've got threat experts to finish off with, which is a managed threat hunting service, provides proactive hunting, prioritization, and kind of like additional context and insights for your security operation centers to identify and respond to threats quickly and accurately. But yeah, this is kind of the overriding theme of Defender XDR. But the cloud apps, like I said, is a real powerful tool, including an E5 from the outset. And this delivers full protection for kind of your SaaS applications hosted in the cloud, kind of helping you to monitor and once again protect your cloud app data across the following areas. And this tends to be known as a Cloud Access Security Broker, or CASB for short. And that's acts as kind of a gatekeeper to kind of real-time access between your enterprise users and your cloud resources they use on a day-to-day basis. And this tends to help organizations protect their environment by providing kind of like a wide range of different capabilities across different areas in the business, whether or not that be discovery of kind of shadow IT, like I said earlier, protection against app-based threats from anywhere in the cloud, and kind of information protection and compliance around given applications. So you're sure that the apps you are allowing are safe to be used and consumed in your organization. And I think one of the cool use cases I see from Defender Cloud Apps anyway is restricting kind of particular applications. Microsoft tend to call this sanctioned and unsanctioned. Sanctioned means in Microsoft terminology that the app is safe to use, and unsanctioned means it's restricted. In my head, it's back to front, but that's just the way Microsoft have it anyway. So unsanctioned means blocked, sanctioned means allowed. And I've got a whole video on my YouTube channel on restricting Gen AI apps outside of Copilot for Microsoft 365 for use in your business. So if you did want to restrict ChatGPT, for example, from being used, then you could do so through the use of Defender for Cloud Apps with the integration with Defender for Endpoint. Cool. Defender for Identity is a cloud-based security solution. It uses on-prem AD domain services signals to identify, detect, and investigate advanced threats, potential compromised identities, and malicious insider actions directed at your organization. It covers kind of three key areas, one being monitoring profile behavior and activities, two being maybe protecting user identities or reducing attack surface, and three being identify suspicious activities and enhanced attacks across the cyber attack kill chain. So that's Defender for Identity. Like I said, it tends to be used for lead credentials, and kind of Microsoft introduced this solution because, of course, they invested a whole load of time, a whole load of money in protecting their cloud services. But for those people who did or remained on tin or on-prem or in a hybrid situation, they needed to provide a solution for them to also protect their data and their identities. Vulnerability management, which we've already briefly spoke about, delivers asset visibility, kind of intelligent assessments, built-in remediation tools for Windows, Mac OS, Linux, Android, iOS, so on and so forth, right? And regards to the asset discovery and monitoring, it uses built-in kind of agentless scanners, let's say, to continuously monitor and detect risk in your business, even when the devices aren't connected to the corporate network. Consolidated inventories, which provide real-time view of your organizational software, applications, certificates, hardware, and firmware, and browser extensions to help monitor and assess all your organizational assets. A key thing as well is the intelligent prioritization, which sits in the middle of the picture we see there, which provides us kind of like a breach likelihood of our given software and inventory, predictions, business context, and also device assessments to quickly prioritize the biggest vulnerabilities in your organization. And then, of course, third, we've got remediation and tracking, which is about enabling security and IT admins to collaborate and seamlessly remediate issues with built-in workflows. There's also dashboard insights as well, where you can see your exposure score and secure score for devices, alongside any aligned security recommendations based on reducing general day-to-day exposure. So threat intelligence, Defender TI. So this used to have its own standalone console. Only recently been deprecated and moved into the Defender XDR console itself at the top left. And this tends to help streamline security analyst triage, incident response, threat hunting, and vulnerability management workflows. Sorry, 1 second. Your analyst can quickly scan new featured articles, search keywords, IOC, so indicator compromises. So if you type into Google, for example, give you a whole load of known public IP addresses, DNS records, all that type of stuff based on Google, if we were to search Google, and shows you featured Microsoft content as well. But there's articles. And these articles are narrated by Microsoft, provide insight into kind of key threat actors, tooling they use to compromise identities and initiate attacks, as well as vulnerabilities. The articles are not blog posts, right, about threat intelligence. While they summarize different threats, they also link to actionable content and key indicators of compromise to help users take action. The description section of the article contains information about the attack or the attack profile. You've got, like I said, the public indicator section of the screen, which shows the previously published indicators related to the article. And then you've got the Defender TI indicator section that covers the indicators that Defender TI research team have found and added to the articles. So a whole lot of kind of, once again, the art of the impossible with Defender threat intelligence. So the Microsoft 365 Defender portal combines protection, detection, investigation, and response to assets, devices, emails, collaboration, cloud apps in a central portal, hence the name Defender XDR, right? And it provides a view to kind of security info, not just security info, but also health info of your organization, and helps your admins and the kind of security operation teams manage and protect kind of the organization. The composition of cards and data depends on, of course, the user role. We talked about the unified RBAC in the consoles earlier, where in which, if the misconception is you're global admin, you get access to everything. No, there is a unified RBAC in these particular consoles. And because the Defender portal uses its own RBAC control, different roles will see different cards, which means then you can at least segment who can access what in your organization. So say, for example, maybe we've got John in IT and Carl in sales. They will need to see different things in the Defender portal, for example. One may see the alerts pane, one may see the reports pane, right? That kind of stuff. The Defender portal also allows admins to tailor the navigation pane to meet your needs, right? You can customize the navigation pane to show or hide particular services or functions based on specific preferences for your business. And this is personalized as well. So, right, so if I customize my own Defender XDR console, that won't change for everyone else in the business, right? So it's done on an individual basis. But this is more just to highlight how everything is in a single pane of glass, right? We can do everything from one console. There's no need to navigate to other web pages or anything like that. We can access this from the one Defender XDR console itself. Cool. So now we're going to describe the security concepts from a SIEM and SOAR perspective, how Sentinel provides threat detection and mitigation, and then security copilot. And then I believe after that, I'll pass you on to my fellow colleague, Steve. But what is a security information and event management system? Well, a SIEM system is quite simply a tool that an organization uses to collect data from across the whole estate, including infrastructure, software, resources. It does an analysis, really, looks for correlation or kind of any anomalies and generates alerts and incidents based on the telemetry it receives, pretty much. A security orchestration, automated and response solution, so a SOAR solution, takes alerts from many sources such as the SIEM system, and the SOAR system then triggers action-driven automated workflows and processes to run security tasks that potentially mitigate the issue. To provide a comprehensive approach to security, your organization should use both a SIEM and SOAR solution. In this case, from a Microsoft perspective, that would be Microsoft Sentinel. But I think this image really brings to light how this all comes together, right? But we've got the SIEM and SOAR, which is Sentinel in this case, and we've got the XDR capabilities, which is Defender XDR, which we just talked about in regards to all those different solutions which sit within. Right, about this is not just an EDR, because I know sometimes this terminology gets thrown about, especially in documentation and collateral online, and when you're watching other webinars and all that lovely stuff. So this diagram shows kind of the end-to-end functionality of Sentinel. So it starts off with kind of collection. So data at cloud scale across all your users, devices, applications, and infrastructure, both on-prem and in kind of multiple cloud situations or multi-cloud situations. The detection piece previously uncovered threats and kind of minimizes false positives using analytics and kind of threat intelligence intel. The investigation kind of analyzes threats with kind of AI, so artificial intelligence and machine learning, and kind of hunts suspicious activities at scale, tapping into kind of lots of different information that Microsoft kind of derives for you. And then the response section here uses kind of rapidly built-in kind of orchestration, like I said, the automation of common security tasks. And Sentinel will be the solution, which then helps bring that together and helps to enable kind of end-to-end security operations. It starts with generally the log ingestion from the data connectors you set up in the solution itself, and then continues to automate response to security alerts afterwards. So my kind of the whole premise around this slide is not to, talk about each point on this slide. This is more of a reference for you guys after today's session, because of course we're going to provide the slides to you, so you can do your own self-paced learning. But this kind of highlights the general workflow from a Microsoft Sentinel perspective. One being kind of connecting your data, so enabling those connectors, and there are native connectors in Microsoft Sentinel which of course have free ingestion, right? And then of course third-party connectors, which of course you need to pay for through a pay-as-you-go mechanism via Azure subscription. We've got the kind of the analytics workbooks there, which kind of monitor the data using the Sentinel integration. You've got the managed incidents piece, which is, receiving an alert, correlating those alerts into an incident, and then of course managing those incidents and assigning those to particular people in your organization. Integrating that with kind of the use of logic apps to create workflows and playbooks, but so you can, how data is when it comes in from kind of source. It's not very ingestible, digestible. You need to kind of ratify it first, then you need to be able to visualize it properly, either through Power BI, but in this case, because it's Sentinel, it'll be a workbook. Investigate that, scope the potential security threat and find kind of the root cause. And then you've got the hunting in the case KQL, which is because the query language you can use to search and query the results you receive from the ingested data. And then of course you've got the ability to then publish that into a content repository in GitHub and use other workbooks people have made, or advocate your own workbooks, etc. And to finish off with this bit, just Copilot Security on Microsoft Copilot Security. We talk a lot about Microsoft Copilot for 365 or Microsoft Copilot. And that's all around, productivity, taking away those mundane tasks from you on a day-to-day basis, being able to create content by just asking Copilot to do so. But of course, Copilot Security kind of sits in its own boat, right? And this is not really aimed at all I like to call end users. Copilot Security is there for your administrators, your security analysts, to not only kind of enhance threat detection, but to speed up that and to kind of reduce the mean time for remediation of those given alerts in the security consoles. So the way Copilot Security is kind of set out is it's got a standalone version and it's got an embedded version, right? Think of Copilot for Microsoft 365 when you've got BizChat, where you can ask it a whole load of questions just like ChatGPT, and then you've got the embedded version of Copilot where it sits within Word, PowerPoint, and Excel. Same principle for Copilot for Security, where it's got its own standalone console where you can create stuff like what we like to call prompt books, which is a whole load of prompts consolidated into a prompt book, which maybe those consolidation of prompts could be a couple of tasks your SOC analysts complete on a day-to-day basis, which might be find me any alerts active. Once you found alerts, find me any IOCs related to that alert. Once we found those IOCs, what was the root cause of that compromise, that type of stuff. But yeah, Copilot Security is also built on a pay-as-you-go model, right? Through what that's called SCUs, so Security Compute Units. There's a recommendation to have free SCUs to power Security Copilot. SCUs are priced at in dollars, $4 per SEU, of course. However that equates to GBP, I'm not entirely sure. But of course there's a recommendation of free, right? So $3 per SEU with a quantity of free. There's 730 hours in a month. That equates to around 9 grand a month times by 12. You're talking over 110 grand a year to power Copilot Security for the whole year. Not cheap, I'll tell you that. Of course, you can deallocate it. It's not to say, you can't deallocate the SCUs and deallocate when it's not in use. But if you were to run this and get kind of the full potential at Copilot Security, then it would cost you 9 grand a month. Then that's when you start weighing out the options, whether or not you want to opt into a full-blown SOC practice and whether or not it's more cost effective to do it that way rather than purchase Copilot security, right? And you probably get more buck for your money out of people rather than Copilot security itself. You kind of got to weigh up the options. But yeah, just think of Copilot security as a tool to help you mitigate risk quicker and enhance your existing security operations. And this is where we're going to get into Defender for Cloud. I will cover the Defender for Cloud piece, and then we'll move on to Steve around the full Azure management piece. So Defender for Cloud is a cloud native application protection platform, or CNAPP for short, which you might see in some of the Microsoft documentation, which is a set of security measures and practices designed to protect cloud-based applications from various cyber threats and vulnerabilities. Tends to combine the capabilities of DevSecOps, so a solution that unifies security management at code level across multi-cloud and multiple pipeline environments. Sorry. Cloud security posture management tends to be free, including your base license. There's services actions that you can take to prevent breaches. And then Cloud Workload Protection Platform, or CWPP, uses specific protections for servers, containers, storage, database, and other workloads, such as just-in-time access for your virtual machines. So say, for example, you don't want to allow RDP port 3389, static access all the time. You can reduce that and do just-in-time access for that particular port. Or it may be deploying an EDR agent or capabilities to a server, for example, through Defender for Service Plan 1, Plan 2. It's a whole load of stuff within the CWPP. Yeah, and that's Defender for Cloud. I think from what you need to take away from this is, not only we're protecting our endpoints, our identities, our data, but you can also protect your resources which live within not only Microsoft Azure, but in multi-vendor cloud solutions such as AWS, Google Suite, on-prem, Oracle, you name it, right? And not only does it cover the posture management around hardening your estate, but also protecting your estate through that just-in-time access, onboarding EDR capabilities, all that lovely stuff. So Defender for DevOps is a service available in Defender for Cloud that provides unified visibility into DevOps security posture and allows you to prioritize remediation of critical issues in code, really, right? And allows you to manage your connected DevOps environments, provides your security teams with kind of a high-level overview of discovered issues that may exist within them through Defender for DevOps console. And it uses a central console to empower security teams with the ability to protect applications and resources from code to cloud across multiple pipeline environments, such as GitHub, Azure DevOps, and findings from Defender for DevOps can be correlated with other cloud security insights to prioritize, remediate code. Key capabilities of Defender for DevOps include kind of unified visibility into security posture, strengthening cloud resource configurations throughout the development lifecycle, and being able to prioritize remediation of critical issues in the code itself. Like I said, CSPM, pretty much a central feature in Defender for Cloud is Secure Score, right? And that provides visibility into your security posture across your cloud assets. And it continually assesses your cloud environment for resources, for security issues. It then aggregates all the findings into a single score so that you can tell at a glance your current security situation, and from indicatively kind of the higher score, the lower the identified kind of risk level. And all Defender for Cloud customers automatically gain access to Secure Score when they enable Defender for Cloud. You get what we like to call Microsoft Cloud Security Benchmark, which is automatically applied to your environments and generates all built-in recommendations that are part of this default kind of initiative. Cloud workload protection, like I said, CWPP is a pillar of cloud security. Its capabilities include being able to detect and resolve threats to resources, workloads, services, and these are delivered through integrations between, with the Defender Service Plans or Defender Plans, specific to the types of resource in your subscription. This can enhance security, and these plans offer different types of features for your workloads, whether or not they're servers, storage accounts, SQL databases, Cosmos DB, that kind of stuff. But yeah, this is broken down to some key areas, right? So like comprehensive endpoint detection and response, which is Defender for servers, which includes Defender for endpoint for your EDR capabilities, vulnerability scanning for virtual machines, container registries, and SQL resources, and multi-cloud security, which allows you to connect your accounts from AWS, Google Suite, and protect those resources and workloads on those platforms with a range of kind of different Microsoft, different security features. We do have policies and initiatives that are found in the Defender for Cloud itself. So what are policies and initiatives, right? Well, a policy definition is created in Azure. Policy is a rule that has specific conditions around what you want to control. And it supports built-in definitions, but you can also create your own custom policy definitions. So like a security initiative, right, is a collection of Azure policy definitions or rules grouped together towards a specific goal or purpose. Security initiatives simplify management of your policies by grouping a set of policies together or logically or even to a single item. And to implement the definitions or initiatives, you assign them to a scope or resources that are supported, such as a management group, subscription resource group, or individual resource, which we went through earlier in regards to the RBAC, right? We also have the Cloud Security Benchmark, which is a authored set of guidelines for security and compliance that provides best practices and recommendations to help improve the security of your workloads, data, and services on Azure and multi-cloud environments, and builds on the controls from the Center for Internet Security, so CIS, and the National Institute of Standards and Technology, which is NIST, with a focus of cloud-centric security. And this is what makes up Defender for Cloud. That's the end of module 3. Now I'm going to pass over to Steve to talk about the core infrastructure in Microsoft Azure.
Hi everybody. On to this module for this next module. And then this is going to take probably 15-20 minutes, or maybe actually a lot sooner, quicker, because this is a small aspect of this, and then we'll switch back to Rio. We'll finish it up with the last. At the end of this, I believe we'll have a short break, and then we'll go back on to finish up with compliance, which is ultimately Purview. So yeah, this is a slight change in gears, because we're gonna and it may be alien to some people, because the Azure world, not everybody has moved to the Azure world, and there's a lot of crossover. So we're going to talk about some of these concepts now, basically. So 3 key areas. Talk about the network, Azure Bastion, which is a secure remote access service. Think Jump Host as a service. And then we're going to talk about Azure Key Vault, which is a secure store for secrets and passwords, credentials, keeping credentials out of code, and where you can store certificates and stuff like that. So for the purpose of the, we're going to talk about Azure Virtual Networks, understanding what the concept is and the construct is, but because this is a fundamentals and within security, it's not intended to go into any depth really into virtual network and Azure Virtual Network. It is a subject of its own entire exam, which is the SC-900, which is an entire exam on this topic. So for the purpose of this, we're going to need to know about network segmentation. And so when we'll talk about segmentation at the moment, just briefly, and then how it relates to Azure Virtual Network. So segmentation is about dividing something into smaller pieces, might sound obvious, but what that segmentation is it can be business groups into smaller areas like human resources, sales, customer service, engineering, and different areas, basically. Yeah. And so network segmentation supports. Why network segmentation is important is because it supports a zero trust model. It's that layered approach to security that's part of that defense and depth strategy that we started right back at the beginning. And assuming breach is also principle of the zero trust model, And so think about this as lateral attack, basically, yes. And so when workloads or part of that workload are placed into separate segments, then you can control traffic from and to those segments to control those secure communication paths. And if one segment gets compromised, you'll be able to better be able to contain an impact and prevent it from laterally spreading through the rest of the network. And we can analogize this to office buildings, corridors and rooms. And so we know that social engineering where someone just tailgates somebody into the office, and once they've tailgated into the office, they've got access to everything. And so actually what we might want to do is some layout, and so we don't get that tailgating. Yep. And so how we look at this is basically what we probably traditionally do on-prem as well, was a hub-spoke network. And so think of VNets as VLANs. I think that's probably the simplest way to look at this, basically. Yes. And so what is a VNet? Well, it's a fundamental building block of private network in Azure. Like a VLAN is a building block of network on-prem. So it's very similar to that traditional network that you build on-prem, and it's an environment that allows resources to communicate with each other, to on-prem out to the internet, and then we can divide that subnet or that VNet into multiple subnetworks or subnets. So and each can have specific resources assigned to them, and so we may have a virtual network with a subnet that's for our web servers, a subnet for our domain controllers, a subnet for our file servers, and we can split it up like that, basically. The key to take away from this, basically, is from an exam perspective, is questions around the reasons for multiple VNets, why you may need to segment and isolate resources, and primarily it's to meet policy requirements. And so if the question is posed, or if the conversation is around how do we meet policy requirements for resources hosted in Azure, we can place them in multiple VNets, and that allows us to segment and isolate those resources. Typically, that could be my production environment needs to be segmented from my development environment, or my HR resources need to be segmented from my engineering resources. And so that's a key takeaway from this slide. Also, we need to note it will be covered later on when we talk about the trust and compliance. So we have a thing called the Microsoft Cloud Security Benchmark, and that is documented. It's it's guidance, it's a framework, and included in that, it provides recommendations and guidances for VNets and other services. Read from this that in the exam, they'll probably mention where would you find recommendations and guidances for VNets and other Azure resources. The Microsoft Cloud Security Benchmark is the document MSCB. That's where you would look for this information, basically. Yes. So that's that slide. Next slide, network security groups. So the most fundamental layer, or the first layer of defense in that defense in depth, and would prevent lateral attack. So this allows us to control traffic in and out of a network. Think of this in your on-prem world as access control lists, or access control lists at a very rudimentary level, or a Windows host firewall. Yep, we can think of that, basically, yes. So it allows you to deny traffic or allow traffic to and from those resources. We talk about lateral attack, so it's the, and we talk about like DLP, and it's that egress traffic as well. So something compromises, but they shouldn't be allowed to egress to the internet, basically. Yes. So we can prevent that. So ultimately, to take away from here, so it can be used to filter network protocol types, typically TCP, UDP, ICMP, not and these ones here. So basically, not strictly limited to these, basically, but these are the ones like for the exam as well, the most common. So common admin ports, RDP, SSH, those common ports. So it allows us to filter on that basically. Yeah. And we should know actions for the default rules. So we have a set of default rules, much like you have on a firewall, and think of this as a root rudimentary Windows host firewall or access control list. And much like we saw with the AD roles, the Entra roles, it's a set of rules. They can't be deleted, they can't be changed, moved, or cloned or copied. However, you can create your own custom rules, and you can set those for the higher priority, and they take over basically. Yeah. So once we've created these rules, then they can be associated with either the subnet or the network interface layer, and that gives us that defense in depth method basically. Yes. So again, we think of the office, we can think of we might have one level, a rule, an allow rule that is reception, but once we pass reception, then actually each individual, say meeting room, you may want to put a particular rule on a particular meeting room or particular office basically. Yes. And we should know that these must have a unique name. And so, yeah. So Azure Firewall, much like a traditional file they have on-prem, we can liken this to, this can be analogous to a next-gen firewall that we'd have on-prem. So next-gen in the way that it doesn't just do layer 4, it has an element of layer 7. Yeah. It had limited layer 7. It's not as it's not fully featured as a third-party network virtual appliance, something you might think of as a Fortinet or a Barracuda, something like that, Cisco Firepower. But it does have rudimentary layer 7 capabilities basically. Yes. So for the level of the exam, what we need to know about the Azure Firewall, it's there to protect Azure resources. Those resources can be Azure VMs and Azure VNets. So when something lives inside an Azure VNet, an Azure Firewall can provide protection for us basically. Yes. One of the services that can provide as well is one of the important or maybe most fundamental reasons that you may want to implement an Azure Firewall is because you need to provide network address translation. And so because you want to protect your internal IP addresses and you don't want to expose them, and so we can provide provides two levels, inbound NAT and outbound NAT, so DNAT and source NAT. So source NAT is probably the most important one, and so when we're going out to the internet, yeah, we can hide behind an IP address. So for the exam, know that what services can Azure Firewall provide? Or look at it this way, the question may be, you need to provide network translation in your network. What service would you use? Azure Firewall is the service that you'd use to provide your NAT translation. Much like you do on a firewall, a layer 3 device, a router. So basically, yeah, this gives you NAT capability. Yeah. Web application firewall, building on the Azure Firewall typically being layer 4, so your non-HTTP HTTPS traffic, which is great. The layer 7 capability we talked about is your outbound. So it gives you that next gen layer, but you're outbound, so URL filtering basically. Whereas web application firewall is all about your incoming traffic. So if you're publishing to the outside world, this is what you need. So you need a web application firewall to protect your HTTP traffic, basically. It protects against DDoS attacks, HTTP floods. And so do you need one or the other? Typically, you're going to need both a web application firewall and a Azure firewall, so a network firewall and a web application firewall. And we can think about, realistically, we can think about the network firewall as the east-west traffic, so your lateral movement protection, and also as your egress protection, and then web application firewall as your north-south protection. Is basically traffic entering your network. So that's what this is for, basically. Yes. It can help you with things like secret injection, and again, if an exam question was you need to provide protection against secret injection, cross-site scripting, DDoS, HTTP floods, web application firewall is the answer there. Think of this as inbound, as your firewall is outbound and like east-west communication once it's inside the network. Talked about there DDoS protection, so really important, and so I guess the things to know for the exam is what is DDoS? It's it's used to protect against protocol attacks, and it's the thing to know as well is it's not enabled by default in an Azure subscription. It's not free, so we have plans, and those plans have a fixed monthly charge. And the information to know here for the exam is 100 public IP addresses are covered without additional costs. So the question would be something around you need to do this without additional costs, basically, yes. So you have 80 public IP addresses and need protection, you can do that without additional costs. If you've got 101 public IP addresses, it incurs a cost, basically, yes. So that is the Azure DDoS service. And again, if the question was around what would you use to protect against protocol attacks, it's Azure DDoS, basically, yes. Really critical, easy to spin up a virtual machine, really hard to find a secure way to connect to it. And so Microsoft is locking this down more, because we're talking about zero trust, assume breach, and the amount of RDP brute force attacks is only increasing, and so this is the way to protect those known admin ports. So this is the way to protect the RDP and SSH. So we don't need to open and expose RDP and SSH ports directly to the outside world. Think of this as a jump host service, and this is a service that you can use for the Azure portal to provide secure remote access to those VMs, again, without exposing those management ports, basically. So it gives you a way to use the native SSH client, PuTTY, or the native RDP client, mst.exe. We can use those, but also we can use it through the portal as well. What happens is I go to the portal, I select my virtual machine, I select connect, and it downloads an RDP file for me. I click the RDP file and it securely connects me, basically. Yeah. It means no public IP required anywhere in the environment. Microsoft provide that public IP. They do the netting for you, basically, yes. No need to manage NSGs. It's all done for you. And to know it's created per VNet. So this means that there's an element of ambiguity. We could call this in the exam or when we're talking about this. So typically per virtual network. So the question may be that for each virtual network, what's the minimum number of bastions that we need? Well, we need one. If we've got 3 virtual networks, we need 3 Azure Bastion instances. There's always the exam world and the real world. In the real world, we're probably using VNet peering, and we can use Azure Bastion, and from there we can hop through RDP into other environments, basically. Yeah, but effectively for the exam, it's one per virtual network. So if the question is about a virtual network and we've got 3 virtual machines, we don't need 3 connection methods. We only need one connection method that can connect to multiple virtual machines, basically. Yeah. Your key vault. So this cloud service for like securely storing accessing secrets. So that secret is anything that you want to control access to. A secret is typically a password, yeah, but it could be an API key. We can also store certificates, and we talked about those the cryptographic keys as well. So we can store our keys in there, basically, yes. But again, for the exam, is knowing when to use which product for a certain business solution. So if the requirement is to store secrets and cryptographic keys, it's Azure Key Vault. Much like if we wanted to know what's the solution in protecting DDoS, it's the Azure DDoS service. So this is the Azure Key Vault. And again, for the exam, there's really not a lot more you need to know other than like the definition and when you would use that. Yeah, and it is to use secrets and your keys. And with that, time move on now. It's looking good.
5 to 12.
5 to 12. So we're bang on track, really. So, yeah, with Rio, we talked about those slightly different order here, but basically, yeah, we talked about Sentinel, we talked about Defender, we talked about Cloud App Security, we talked about Defender for Cloud, and the infrastructure security services in Azure, and that was VNet segmentation, Azure Firewall, Web Application Firewall, DDoS protection, and the Key Vault. And with that, there are a couple of questions. So this one here will give you the essence of time. I guess we will we'll go through this, but how can application developers benefit from Azure Key Vault? And so it's option, the last option, securely store and retrieve application secrets. Now, yeah, we'll go through that. So the last one as well. Sorry, that one there. And the answer for this one is going to be the first one, which is like CSPM, basically. Yeah, that gives you your secure score for one of a that's going to give you your secure score. On to Sentinel, looking at the Sentinel aspect. So the pillars there are going to be collect, detect, investigate, and respond. And so collect, detect, and investigate. Collect, detect, and investigate is going to be your SIEM solution. Respond is going to be your source solution, basically. The investigate is going to be your threat hunting, basically, yes. And then on to the last bits was the solution from looking at the understanding really about what the different SKUs are and what they do, what they protect against. So in this scenario, it's going to be option A, which is going to be Defender for Office 365. And always the thing that catches people out is Microsoft Defender for Identity is your on-prem like AD and not your Entra ID. So yeah. And with that, that's the end of learning path 3.
We've got a break for 5.
Yeah, so we're gonna break for 5. It's 11:57. Gonna come, yeah, we'll call it 8 minutes. We'll come back at 5 past 12. There's a lot of this last path, which would be the compliance solutions, basically Purview is what we're going to talk about. And yeah, we'll see you back at 5 past.
Brilliant. We'll kick off with module 4. So this is Rio now. You're stuck with me for the last hour. Let me just quickly sort my screen. There we go. So this module is all around describing capabilities of Microsoft compliance. The agenda for this particular path will touch base on the Service Trust Portal and some privacy capabilities around that. Compliance management capabilities in Microsoft Purview, the new and improved compliance portal. We'll look at describing information protection and what that actually looks like. Data lifecycle management around deposition and retention, and data governance capabilities in Microsoft Purview itself. That will be followed on with insider risk capabilities, so talking around exfiltration capabilities and alerting, and then finished off by describing e-discovery and audit capabilities in Microsoft Purview. So module 1, describing the Microsoft Service Trust Portal and privacy capabilities. We'll look at describing the offerings of the Service Trust Portal, some of the Microsoft privacy principles, and describing what Microsoft Private is. So organizations must stay in line with compliance-related legal and regulatory standards to protect their customers, and not only their customers, but also the partners and themselves. And Microsoft does provide a whole load of different tools and capabilities to enable organizations to manage compliance. So we'll learn about some of the common compliance needs our organizations are required to meet. So to kick things off, Service Trust Portal. Service Trust Portal is a public-facing site which you can access via servicetrust.microsoft.com, which tends to publish audit reports and other compliance-related information associated with Microsoft Cloud services, not only Microsoft 365, but also Microsoft Azure. And you, as a user, can download those audit reports produced by external auditors in relation to Microsoft and gain insight from Microsoft authored white papers that provide details on how Microsoft Cloud services protect your data and how you can manage cloud data security and compliance for your organization. Like I said, you can access the Service Trust Portal by navigating to servicetrust.microsoft.com. And some of the content categories included in the Service Trust Portal in regards to their landing page include certifications, regulations, standards, security implementation, and some design information as well, with the goal of making it easier for you to meet regulatory compliance and objectives by understanding how Microsoft Cloud Services keep your data secure. There's also reports, white papers, and other known artifacts, such as business continuity and disaster recovery information, pen test information, and security assessment attestation of penetration tests, as well as privacy and data protection resources and white papers and answers to any frequently asked questions. That's the Service Trust Portal. Microsoft Private is very much coming into its own over the last 2 to 3 months, just due to the sheer fact that we're trying to protect data, and AI is making that extremely difficult. Hence why we're talking a lot around Microsoft Purview at this point in time, as well as Microsoft Private. So Private pretty much exists due to what we like to call GDPR, right? General Data Protection Regulations, in which a former or an existing employee can ask their employer for information around them as a individual. So anything around their personal identifiable information that organization holds or is processing. And with that, Microsoft needed to come up with a solution to manage that request of data through some sort of workflow management solution. And this is where Microsoft Private comes into play. And it's broken down into 2 key areas, one being privacy risk management, which provides visibility into your organizational data and provides some policy templates for reducing your data, albeit where does the data live in regards to data geograph. You know, how many DSR requests are you getting from UK, US, Asia, North America, that kind of stuff. And being able to collaborate with additional custodians, add additional notes, and see and exactly identify where pieces of information are being referenced, and having visibility into that reference information as well. So being able to actually physically see an email or a particular document where that information exists, and be able to provide that information then to the data request or the data subject request person. We look at Microsoft Purview. So we're looking at the Microsoft Purview portal, describe some peripheral information around the compliance manager and some of the use and benefits of obviously taking up the compliance score. So Microsoft Purview brings together all tools and data that are needed to help kind of understand and manage your organizational compliance needs or requirements. It's available to customers with any Microsoft 365 SKU, and of course, you having the applicable role-based access control, whether or not that be global administrator or one of the unified RBAC roles, such as compliance admin or compliance data administrator, you should be able to access Microsoft Purview as a solution. And the way in which Microsoft Purview is broken down is it has a compliance scorecard, and this scorecard shows the compliance score and provides a level of information to the admins, also the compliance manager, where they can see a breakdown of the compliance score. And this score measures the progress in completing recommended actions or recommended improvements within particular regulatory controls. So this score, in essence, helps an organization to understand its current compliance posture and also helps them to prioritize actions based on the potential risk or potential to reduce risk, sorry. The new solution catalog card is a collection of integrated solutions that are used to manage end-to-end compliance scenario across kind of the different solution areas. Whether or not be information protection or data lifecycle management section, it quickly shows you how to use these solutions and protect and govern your data in your organization. Insider risk management as well shows you how your organization can identify, analyze, and act on internal risks before they can cause harm. Because, like I said earlier, not all risks are like the GRC. All right, not all risks are external. There are also internal risks, insider risks. Whether or not that's inadvertent data leakage or someone in your organization trying to pass off information outside of your organization, there are still insider risks we need to be aware of. And then we've got the discovery and response section on the homepage, which allows you to quickly find, investigate, and respond to compliance issues with relevant data. That's Microsoft Purview. Compliance Manager piece of Microsoft Purview is a feature in the portal that helps you as an admin manage your compliance requirements with greater ease and kind of convenience. It can help organizations throughout their compliance journey, from taking inventory of data protection risks or managing complexities of implementing the controls or recommendations Microsoft advise, or even just staying current with regulations and certifications and auditors. In essence, it helps simplify compliance and reduce risk by providing kind of assessments based on common regional and industry regulations. We went through some of them earlier, like HIPAA, NIST, FedRAMP, SOC, so on and so forth. Workflow capabilities that enable admins to efficiently complete risk assessments for their organization, and then step-by-step improvement actions that can help to meet regulations and standards relevant to your organization, not just general all up. The compliance score, if we dig a bit deeper, is a calculation that helps an organization understand its overall compliance posture by measuring how it's progressing with what improvement actions. Compliance score, in a bit more detail, is obviously taking up recommendations that improves the score, and this score can help organizations to understand its current posture and prioritize actions based on the potential to reduce risk. So probably the question being asked is kind of what is the difference between compliance manager and kind of compliance score? Well, compliance manager is an end-to-end kind of solution in Purview to enable admins to manage and track compliance activities, whereas a compliance score is a calculation of the overall compliance posture across the organization. However, the compliance score is available through Compliance Manager itself, and it gives the admins, either you or whoever in the organization, to understand and increase the compliance score so they can ultimately improve the organizational compliance posture. And the overall compliance score is calculated using kind of two fundamental kind of assigned actions, one being your improved actions that the organization is expected to manage, and then Microsoft actions, actions that Microsoft are expected to manage, right? And these action types have points assigned to them, and this counts towards your overall compliance score. And this can be considered technical or non-technical, doesn't matter, which also affects how it impacts the overall compliance score. The actions which you take on are also assigned a score value based on whether they're categorized as mandatory, discretionary, or preventative, detective, or corrective. What's the difference, right? So mandatory is it shouldn't be bypassed. It's mandated. For example, creating a policy to set password limit for expiration, for example. Discretionary, these actions depend on whether the user understanding or adhering to the policy. For example, a policy where maybe a user required to ensure their devices are locked before they leave them. That could be discretionary. And then we've got preventative, which are actions designed to handle specific risks, like using encryption to protect data at risk if there are breaches or attacks. And detective actions kind of monitor systems to identify kind of irregularities that could represent risks or be used to detect breaches or intrusions. An example of this will be kind of type of actions, system access audits or regulatory compliance audits, for example. And then last but not least, corrective, which helps admins to kind of minimize adverse effects of security incidents by undertaking corrective measures to reduce their kind of immediate exposure or possibly even kind of, the damage. Actions that are, I think it's a key thing here, actions that are mandatory or preventative with the 27 points, which you can see via the screenshot, right, provide the highest points value towards your compliance score. And these are cumulative points for every action completed. And the compliance score is shown as a percentage representing all the actions completed compared with the ones currently outstanding on your recommendation list. So we'll start looking at describing information protection, data lifecycle management, and data governance capabilities in Microsoft Purview. So first things first, we'll talk about data classification because we need to protect all sorts of different types of information, including, financial, personal identifiable information. And fundamentally, this must be done to ensure kind of customers and, employees and clients are protected from all types of different risks. And the business needs to stay in line with compliance standards wherever it kind of operates and wherever it resides, right? And Microsoft Purview provides a whole list of solutions that can help you implement information protection as well as data lifecycle management, which is talking around the kind of the retention piece, right? And in this module, you particularly learn kind of how the solutions and capabilities like data classification, records management, and data loss prevention can help implement information protection and data lifecycle management. And we'll look at this in a bit more detail. And the way I want you to look at Microsoft Purview is there's kind of 4 key areas, know your data, understand your data, protect your data, prevent data loss, and govern your data. The way I like to look at Purview anyway is one being the kind of data estate. Where does your data actually live, right? It can live in several different areas in the business or even outside the business. It could live in Microsoft 365, which is native. It could live in a third party environment, which could be the likes of LinkedIn or Salesforce or wherever it may be. It could be on-prem, where you may have on-prem file shares, right? Where you've got data which you still need to protect, but not necessarily in your Microsoft 365 cloud estate, or on your endpoint itself. So that's how I like it to look at it from a data estate discovery perspective. Then it's all around, okay, we understand where our data lives. How do we go about protecting that data? Well, not protecting the data, classifying and identifying that data. Well, we've got a few different types of classifications in Purview, one being sensitive information types, which are broken down into maybe keyword matches, keyword dictionaries, regular expressions, functions. So say, for example, I could create a sensitive information type in my business where we're looking for a regular expression based on a credit card number, right? We could do that. Or it could be a keyword match where I'm looking for the name Steve Miles, right? Art of the impossible there. Next classification type we can create is a what we like to call a trainable classifier, which is built on machine learning, right? And this is not necessarily looking for what's within the document, but what the document actually is, right? So if you've got a repository or document library in SharePoint Online, for example, it's got a whole load of new start forms completed in there. We don't really care about what information's in the document, but what the document actually is. And this is a new starter document we're looking for. Then we can create what we like to call trainable classifier. And that That takes a bit of time to see the data, make sure that, we're enacting the machine learning algorithm and Microsoft understand what we're actually looking for. So we do need to see the positive and negative samples of that data so that it understands. But there are options. And then we've got what we call EDM, which is the exact data match, which is all around schematized data assets, or in other words, in simple terms, databases, right? And this is where we do a kind of a direct export from wherever our database resides, wherever the database is, and we pull that information into Purview, and we use what we got, that information from the database, to find stuff within our Microsoft 365 estate. So we looked at kind of where the data lives, how we go about labeling that data, which is, funny enough, a Copilot readiness piece. And now we talk about protecting your data. And protecting your data, there's a whole lot of different solutions which we're going to go through, like labeling, information protection, right? Not just labeling it, but also encrypting the documents and appending a watermark, a header, a footer, etc. DLP to reduce data leakage, right? And key thing there is reducing data leakage. Why is it not stop data leakage? Well, we've all got phones on our lap, right? We've all got phones. We can all take a picture of our screen. It doesn't reduce. It doesn't stop. It just reduces inadvertent data leakage. And then we've got information barriers, which kind of restrict two-way communication between different sets of people in your organization. Analogy-wise, here could be you've got a school, right? You've got teachers and you've got pupils. And they both got Microsoft Teams, but you don't want the teachers and the pupils talking to one another. You can use what we like to call information barriers, and that restricts two-way communication through the use of Microsoft Purview. At the moment, that's bi-directional. You can't do it one way. However, there are use cases for that. And yeah, there's a whole load of different solutions in Purview, and that's what Purview is here for, to go through that data estate piece, that data classification, and also that data protection. And then not only that, how long do we keep that data for, right? Most organizations will have a retention policy in which they can only keep data for, let's say, 7 years around a particular individual in the organization, or an indicator maybe once they've left the org, then we keep it for this period of time, or upon creation date. There's a whole lot of different things we can do, and this is what Purview gives us. Data classification capability. So yeah, I've already talked through this, so I'm going to skip this piece. But labeling, available as part of kind of information protection in Purview portal, enables labeling and protection of content without affecting productivity and collaboration. With labels, organizations or you as a business can decide on the labels applied to content, such as email, documents, and they're much like stamps, right? Where you apply to physical documents, but digitally. That makes sense. And labels can be customizable. Like you can create different categories specific to organizations, such as personal, public, confidential, and highly confidential. And you can opt into kind of Microsoft's predefined ones after a set date. Clear text, because each label is stored in clear text in the content's metadata or third party and service, and so all services can read it and then apply their own protective actions, which we talked about the data estate earlier. And then of course persistency. After you apply a sensitivity label to a content, the label is stored in the metadata of that email document, so it carries wherever that content moves, right? Including the protection actions and the data becomes the basis for applying and enforcing policies. The labels can be used to also encrypt email, or both email and documents. When a document or email is encrypted, access to that document or content is restricted, so that it can be decrypted only by users who are authorized by the label encryption settings. It remains encrypted no matter where it stays, inside or outside your organization, even if the file is renamed, and it's encrypted both at rest and in transit, as per what we went through earlier in regards to the encryption concepts. We can also mark the content when Office apps are used. Marking the content includes, like I said, watermarks, headers, footers. Headers or footers can be added to emails or documents that have the label applied. Watermarks can be applied to documents, but not to the email. And we can apply the labels automatically. And this is the big thing when we start talking Business Premium versus E5, because Business Premium can label automatically at a client side perspective, i.e. as and when you go and compose an email or create a Word document, it can either recommend or mandate a user applies a label. If you want service-side automatic labeling, which is we want to apply a whole load of emails at rest, a label, and encrypt it at kind of at scale, then you need service-side labeling, which is part of the E5 license. Of course, there are add-ons you can purchase or procure to get the automatic labeling as a standalone. That's totally feasible, but that's just a kind of the big thing around BP versus E5 from that perspective. Data loss prevention, like I said, is all around data, trying to reduce data leakage. And like I said, it's data leakage, which is a key thing there, not data stoppage, right? Because our end users always find a way to take data outside of the given organization. If that's taking a picture or if that's copying and pasting from one area to another, or they'll always find a way. But this definitely helps identify, monitor, and automatically kind of protect information across Microsoft 365, whether or not that's Exchange Online, OneDrive for Business, SharePoint Online, so on and so forth, Teams, physical devices, on-prem repositories, Power BI. There's a whole lot of different places we can protect using data loss prevention. And DLP policies are kind of how we monitor the activities that users take on kind of sensitive information we define through SITs, what we talked about earlier. Whether or not the items are in transit or in use, we can take protective actions, right? We can show a pop-up or a policy tip to the user that warns them that they may want to they're trying to share sensitive items inappropriately or inadvertently. We can show them a pop-up. We can block sharing via a policy tip and allow the user to override the block and capture the user justification, for example. We can block the sharing without the override option, or for data at rest, sensitive items can be locked and moved to a secure quarantine location. And for Microsoft Teams IM, with the Teams Premium license, the sensitive information we can restrict and won't be displayed, right? So how we go about kind of creating DLP policies is we choose a type of data we want to monitor. There are predefined policy templates that Microsoft provides, and you can choose from categories such as financial, medical, health data, or privacy for various countries and regions. Alternatively, you can create your own custom policy that uses the available sensitive information types or SITs, potential labels, and labels Microsoft define. And then we choose a location where we want to apply the policy, right? Whether or not that's Exchange, SharePoint, OneDrive, and the conditions what need to be satisfied or met for the policy to kind of take precedence. So once we've done that, set the policy, let's just first understand lastly understand what endpoint DLP is, because this is quite cool. So we talked about data estate earlier, that we may have data which actually physically resides on our endpoint. So there are restrictions around that we need to take into consideration when deploying data loss prevention as well, i.e., restricting people from taking information from our device onto a USB stick, for example, or being able to copy that sensitive information printing that information, right, or pasting that information to a generative AI website. We could do this through endpoint DLP. The way we do that is onboard the devices to Microsoft Defender endpoint, which we talked about earlier, and install what we call the Purview browser extension onto the likes of Edge, Chrome, and Firefox. And this allows us not just to monitor Copilot for 365 interactions, let's say, but also enterprise Gen AI services. But yeah, it enables you to audit, manage many activities on Win 10, Win 11, and macOS devices. And yeah, once again, monitor creation of item, renaming, copying items to network shares, accessing items using unallowed apps and browsers. There's a whole load of capability there with DLP. Communication compliance is pretty cool, especially when we talk Copilot for Microsoft 365 or Microsoft 365 Copilot, however they call it nowadays. But this allows us to, funny enough, monitor communications between individuals. And let's say, we've got a real sensitive project currently in play or in progress, and this can't be exposed to the outside world. This is kind of end all. This needs to be highly confidential. We can create what we like to call sensitive information type in Purview and use that sensitive information type based on the project, which is currently highly confidential, to monitor communications. And if we see that sensitive information type mentioned in Teams or email we could be notified as an administrator based on what we define in the policy. And not only that, we could put some restrictive controls around that so that information can't be used in your business. So that's kind of an example of communication compliance, but generally it's inside a risk solution, helps you detect, capture, and act on inappropriate messages that can lead to potential data security compliance incidents within your organization. And that covers a whole load of different locations, Teams, Viva Engage, Outlook, even WhatsApp, and so on, right? And help stop particular business policy violations. And not only co-pilot interactions or sensitive information types, we're looking at monitoring. It could be harassment, it could be conflict of interest in your business. It could be particular images you don't want people sending, right? There's a whole load of stuff you can monitor using communication compliance. So that's the end of that. So now we'll describe e-discovery and audit capabilities in Microsoft Purview. So we'll describe the e-discovery capabilities of Microsoft Purview and describe the auditing capabilities of Microsoft Purview. Cool. So e-discovery, once again, just like Defender XDR, just like Microsoft Entra, is an umbrella term for many different solutions. E-discovery comes in three parts: content search, e-discovery standard, and e-discovery premium. And e-discovery is the process of identifying and delivering electronic information that can be used as evidence in predominantly legal cases. If it's not a legal case, you'll probably use a content search. But you can use e-discovery tools in Purview, search for content exchange online, OneDrive for business, SharePoint Online, Teams, Groups, Yammer, or Viva Engage now. And you can search mailboxes and sites in the same e-discovery search, and then export these results and share them to whoever needs those results in the organization. And these can be used to identify, hold content as well in the mailbox and sites. And like I said, it comes in three parts: content search, e-discovery standard, and e-discovery premium. Content search, typically you use the content search tool to search for content across 365 data sources and then export the results to a local computer. Simple as, right? You don't get any custodian management, you don't get any case management, you don't get any workflow management, you don't get any on hold ability. It is literally just a search across your Microsoft 365 estate. However, when we start diving into the realms of e-discovery standard, this is a solution built on the basic search and export functionality of content search, but by enabling you to create e-discovery cases and assign an e-discovery manager to specific cases. And it also lets you associate searches and exports with a case and lets you place people on hold or custodians on hold while you commit and complete the particular case. Premium builds on, like I said, it's cumulative, right? Just like the other stuff we talked about earlier in regards to Defender for Office 365. Builds on the existing capabilities of e-discovery standard. However, in addition, Premium provides an end-to-end workflow to identify, preserve, collect, review, and analyze and export content that's responsive to your organization internal and external investigations. That's legal teams, managed custodians, individuals who you've identified as people of interest in the case, and the workflow to communicate with the custodians. Also allows you to collect and copy data into review sets where you can filter, search, and tag content or redact content, so you can focus on what's actually important for you in relation to that particular search. I think what's really important as well, when you go to head to export an e-discovery search, it can only be done in Microsoft Edge, right? You can conduct an e-discovery search in any browser, but to actually export it, it needs to be done in Microsoft Edge. So that's e-discovery. So last but not least, I want to say is audit, right? Auditing solutions in Purview help you effectively respond to security events or investigations or anything internal or even compliance, right? And thousands of users and admins operate, in Microsoft 365 day in, day out, and everything you do day in, day out is captured, recorded, and typically retained in your organization's unified audit log. So these audit logs or these events are searchable by your security operation team, IT admins, insider risk teams, and compliance and legal investigators. These audit logs are typically retained for this slide says 90 days, right? But Microsoft have I want to say recently, they haven't recently done it quite a while ago, increased that to 180 days, right? But for exam purposes, the answer is 90 because their content hasn't caught up with the change of Microsoft updates, because of course Microsoft update everything every other day. And we can retain this information for as long as a year or up to 10 years based on applicable licensing. All right. So with audit standard, this provides you with the ability to log and search for audited activities across your Microsoft 365 data sources. The premium, like I said, gives you the default of 1 year, but then the ability to purchase a 10-year retention as well. That's kind of the key takeaway there. And it could take anywhere from 30 minutes to typically 24 hours after an event occurs for the corresponding audit log to be returned in the results of an audit log search. So if you were to conduct a search based on an activity you've just seen happen or occur, it may take some time for that actually to reflect in the audit log. So don't be too disheartened if you don't see that straight away in the audit entries. So we looked at the Service Trust portal in a brief bit of detail, privacy, learned about compliance management, Purview and the compliance score. We looked at data lifecycle management briefly, some of the insider risk capabilities, as well as e-discovery and the audit capabilities in Purview. So to finish off with, got a quick knowledge check. Starting off with question number 1. Privacy and how private data is handled are top concerns for many organizations and consumers. Microsoft helps organizations meet these challenges through capabilities offered through 2 solutions. What are those solutions? And if you could paste your answers in the chat, that'd be great. And I think once again, if you really read the question, right, privacy, hint, and how private data is handled are top concerns for many organizations, right? And we looked at a solution called, funny enough, Microsoft Priva, right? So the answer would be B, Priva, privacy risk management and private subject requests. Once again, that gives you the ability to be able to manage personal identifiable information and handle DSR requests, if any. Question number 2, your new colleagues on the admin team are unfamiliar with the concept of share controls and compliance manager. How would the concepts of share controls be explained? Remember, we talked about shared responsibility earlier in the session around you as well as a service provider. It's not all just on you to manage security and implementation. Therefore, the answer would be C. Controls that both your organization and Microsoft share responsibility for implementing. Second set of questions. Within the organization, some emails are confidential and should be encrypted so that only authorized users can read them. How can this requirement be implemented? The records management we already talked about. Once again, process elimination, right? Records management we already talked about, kind of retention, deposition reviews. Content Explorer I talked about. To actually view content, we need a particular RBAC role. So that's talking about actually visibly seeing the data. Labeling, we talked about, okay, not only can we apply a label, but we can also apply encryption on top with watermarking, footers, headers, that kind of stuff. So the answer will be B. Last question. The compliance admin for the organization wants to explain the importance of insider risk management to the business leaders. What use case would apply? Once again, process of elimination, right? C to identify, looking at C to identify and protect against devices shutting down at critical moments. It's nothing to do with insider risk management. That would to do with more endpoint. To identify and protect against malicious software across your network, such as ransomware, that'd be more Defender for Office 365 email and collaboration. So the answer must be A, to identify and protect against risks like employees sharing confidential information. Like I said, insider risk management is around exfiltration activities, okay, outside of your known org based on insider risk. Okay. I think that is the end of the content, and that takes us up to 20 to 1. So we're ahead of schedule. And like I said, that was a consolidated delivery of the SC-900 course in the space of 3.5 hours. Of course, we'll provide the kind of the collateral after today's session. And with that, it's got a whole load of links to the Microsoft Learn content. It's got the links to my YouTube channel if you want to dive into a bit deeper into some of the solutions. And of course, we'll also send out the ebooks. And on top of that, you'll get a free exam voucher to undertake the exam. Like I said, thank you for attending today's course.